PO Box 8690, Derby, DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
She could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 9th of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Who's got the power? The Prime Minister meets Metro mayors in Downing Street with a promise to push power away from Whitehall. But is this just a further layer of meddling, tax-raising politicians?
And NATO calls. This evening, Keir Starmer flies to Washington for his first summit as Prime Minister. He's under pressure to raise defence spending, a promise he refused to commit to during the election campaign.
Why England fans are fuming over the choice of this German referee who's to take charge tomorrow in the semi-final showdown with the Netherlands. We'll find out more.
And this afternoon, we'll see Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak together in Parliament for the first time since the election. What will the body language be like? We'll be live for the ceremonial selection of the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Now, Emily and I disagree on this one.
Just a bit.
Just a little bit. Should local mayors, these metro mayors, the people like Andy Burnham or Ben Houchen, have more power to control their local area?
No.
That's a clear one. Why do you think not?
In my humble opinion, I am willing to be proven wrong if this becomes a fantastic exercise in empowering local citizens. I worry that it actually makes our leaders less accountable. It actually fragments our country. And guess what? Will increase your taxes. That's what I reckon.
I think that there's a real opportunity here because we're in for almost no opposition in Parliament. The Labour Party has so many MPs in Parliament, they can railroad anything through the House of Commons. One of them's a Conservative. But of course there are going to be more mayoral elections through the course of the next Parliament. And I think that if people have another outlet for opposition, I think it works quite well in the United States of America. And I always think that perhaps having one party in control of absolutely everything is a sort of ratchet for more government.
But that's what
if you have different parties.
You have a Labour government and Labour mayors. overwhelming majority.
Only for the moment.
I did a Twitter poll saying, do you want mayors to have more power? Absolutely, got 6.3%. Dom says, the problem with devolution, as we've seen in Scotland and elsewhere, devolved politicians spend a lot of their time concerned with powers they don't have rather than those they do have. There's always more.
I think that's wise. I think that's wise, which is why a clear delineation of what mayors can do and what mayors can't do might fix that problem.
We always want
less posturing on foreign affairs and more talking about building.
Let us know what you think. GBNews.com/your say, but it's the headlines with Mark White.
Well, just after midday, the headlines from the GB News Centre. In the last hour, 3 asylum seekers have ended their High Court legal action after the government scrapped the Rwanda deportation scheme. Lawyers for the people who cannot be named were told today that the cases would no longer continue. According to the Home Office, their legal costs will now be paid by the taxpayer. It comes after Home Secretary Yvette Cooper branded the policy a con. Well, Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. Well, the new Cabinet met this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers departed Downing Street after discussing Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, building hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackling illegal immigration. Tonight, the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Labour leader has already pledged his unshakable support for the alliance. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between both Britain and America. Well, the summit comes as world leaders condemn Russia's missile attack on the main children's hospital in Kyiv. These are live pictures at the scene of that strike as rescuers continue to sift through the rubble. Ukraine's President Zelensky says 37 people, including 3 children, are now confirmed to have died. More than 170 others were injured when the missile struck in broad daylight on Monday. The Prime Minister said the government will set up a council for regions and nations during a meeting with mayors in Downing Street. A warning for those watching on TV, the following footage contains some flash photography. Greater Manchester's Andy Burnham and Mayor of London Sadiq Khan were among those who attended this morning. Sir Keir said he's planning to loosen Whitehall's tight grip over big cities and regions through a new partnership approach. It follows warnings by the Local Government Association of a £6 billion funding gap in the local authority sector. Conservative Mayor of the Tees Valley, Ben Houchin, told GB News the meeting went well.
It was very positive, actually. I was really pleasantly surprised that he was really energetic, really keen. He wanted to work with us, and he was very open to the idea of much more devolution, which has changed with different prime ministers over the last 10 or 15 years, depending on which one it is. So ultimately, we're going to have to keep him to his word. If he keeps his promises, then it looks very promising for further devolution, and ultimately, it looks very promising that we can get on and deliver for our regions.
Sir Tony Blair is urging the Labour government to embrace the new use of new technology. Speaking at his Future of Britain conference in London, the former PM said AI and digital ID could boost growth and generate savings. He also warned that the country would become much poorer unless we increase value and efficiency through public spending.
Breakthrough represented by generative AI, there is going to be another revolution on top of this existing one. The opportunities are huge. The risks are huge. But there is absolutely no doubt that this is an era of transformation.
Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in cash reserves. It needs new funds to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. It could leave the new Labour government with a difficult decision over whether to nationalise it, something they've said they will not do. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Mark White. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, ahead of his first NATO summit as Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer is being urged to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP, with one former head of the British Army warning the UK's armed forces are so depleted that they could only fight a small war for about a month.
Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair has warned that the new Labour government will have to raise taxes by £50 billion unless it can come up with radical new ways to improve productivity.
He also said the UK must embrace artificial intelligence technology or risk getting left behind.
Yes, well, this all comes as Parliament returns for the first time since the general election today. Both Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are due to speak at the dispatch box.
Well, who better to discuss it all with now than our own political editor, Christopher Hope, joins us from still quite a wet Downing Street. Christopher, we just can't catch a break in this country. This weather, my goodness me. Perhaps people thought that with a new government we'd turn the... Oh, has the sun shone? No. Okay, do you know what? I'm just going to get to the politics rather than the weather. This is what we're here for. Tony Blair speaking today. How significant is this?
Yeah, the timing is significant. I should say, Tom and Emily, I'm growing gills like a fish. I've been in number 10 for so long in the rain, but never mind. Yeah, you're right, totally. Tony Blair is speaking today. He's Tony Blair Institute for Institute. 800 people there advise 40 countries about how best to run their governments. He is speaking today and has been speaking about how he thinks AI can help boost productivity. But some of the language from his chief economist has been picked up. He forecasts that taxes should have to rise by 1.9% of GDP to stabilise debt, pay for an ageing society and deal with declining revenues from the UK's oil and gas fields in the North Sea to avoid austerity. So Tony Blair's team has laid bare the challenge facing this government, and that's why you're hearing so much from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and in fact Keir Starmer at his cabinet at 9:30 this morning, he told those around the table that they have to boost growth. It's all about growth. His second cabinet meeting in 4 days. He's making very clear, I want you all to grow the economy. How will you do it? Tell us. And that's why we saw yesterday ripping up the planning rulebook as it stands. A new planning rulebook to drop to put the emphasis on economic growth will come from this government before the end of this month, and that's the focus entirely. They want growth to pay for what they want to do, and maybe cut taxes, they said, for working people. We'll wait and see if that happens, but there's no money at the moment, and that's why there's a big move currently on deregulating areas like onshore wind and parts of the green belt, the so-called grey belt. Car parks and garages sitting in the green belt can be built on in the future under the government's plans. So that's the idea behind that, yeah. And it's a big day here for the Prime Minister and the whole government, because they're swearing in the Prime Minister in the House of Commons shortly at around 2:30 this afternoon. Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the Commons, he'll be dragged to the chair as is custom, and he'll become almost certainly the Speaker for the next 5 years, as he was for the past Parliament as well. So that will happen, and then he'll be off to NATO, the summit in Washington. I'll be flying with him on that flight over. There's pressure on him already on defence spending. Some want him to go to 3%, but he won't even say when he'll get to 2.5% of GDP. The Tories said they'll get there by the end of this decade. We have not heard that from the Labour government. They say they'll get there as soon as possible, but they hope to get there soon. And with the war on in Ukraine, UK support of that, they've got to get on with that, I think. Many people would think start spending more on defence as soon as possible.
Yes, and presumably there will be a huge amount of pressure at that NATO summit for all countries to cough up more for defence spending. We know there's a huge amount of pressure. There's many former heads of the army cited in the press today. We're going to be speaking to one very soon about that need, about how desperate we are for more cash when it comes to defence.
And that's right. I mean, one of the points made by Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, was at this NATO summit, he said Sunak himself will be at the front of the room, at the top table of one of the few countries paying 2.5% of our national income on defence, whereas he said that Starmer, now Prime Minister, would be at the back of the room because he can't commit to that. So the challenge he'll face when he gets there is what will he do? He'll meet with Joe Biden, of course, in the White House, and they'll have all sorts of bilateral meetings. Everyone over there, the 40 or so world leaders will want to meet with our new Prime Minister. There'll be a beam of sunlight on him during this summit because everyone likes a new leader, particularly one who's won a landslide victory in the election. So it's a big moment for him. The timing is great for Sir Keir Starmer, but can he step up and commit on defence? That'll be a key question. We'll be pressing it on him for GB News over this trip.
Now, just finally, Chris, of course, MPs swearing in today. That will include 5 members of Parliament from Reform UK. Do you have any inkling about what they're going to get up to on the green benches, where they might be sitting? I can't help but notice, of course, that Dennis Skinner, who was known as the Beast of Bolsover, sat in the same place on the front of the opposition benches for many, many years. He used to heckle big state occasions. I've just had in the back of my mind a thought. What if Nigel Farage were to take up that seat and that role?
He could do. I think the front bench area you're talking about, just to the right of the gangway on the left of the, as the Speaker looks out on the Commons, is normally taken by the third party, in this case Liberal Democrats. And normally, I think, the reform grouping, as it would be about 3 or 4 rows back. But that's right, Dennis Skinner used to sit back when all the MPs trooped away to the House of Lords to hear the government's plan for government in the state opening of Parliament, which is next Wednesday, next week. He would sit there and refuse to go as some kind of demonstration against the monarchy and utter some sarcastic remark which got everyone laughing in the Commons. So I think we are going to see, probably, Tom, over the next 5 years, some stunts from this rump Reform UK MP group. There's 5 of them. Things like walking out during the budget is something which the SNP used to do when Alex Salmond ran a similar group of people, of MPs. They're the 5th party in Parliament. They've got to make themselves heard and known about. And I know that we know what Nigel Farage got up to in the European Parliament when he was an MEP. He'll be trying similar stunts, I imagine, now as an MP. And we'll be watching closely at GB News.
Fascinating.
I must say they've done an impressive photo shoot today in all corners.
Yes, they've been all over Westminster Hall.
Yeah, all Westminster Hall. Covered it all. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope, our political editor there. Now, as we were just saying, Sir Keir Starmer is facing quite a bit of pressure to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. So who better to speak to than the former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt, who joins us now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Would you echo some of the comments in the Telegraph today from Sir Patrick Sanders that essentially we only have the capacity for a 1-month-long war, no longer?
Yes, I would certainly echo those. And Patrick Sanders was echoing a very revealing report that was published last week by Dr. Rob Johnson. Now, who is Dr. Johnson? He was appointed 2 years ago by Ben Wallace as the then Secretary of State for Defence to lead a new directorate in the MOD called the Net Assessment and Challenge Directorate. And what has happened over the last 2 years is that Dr. Johnson has looked very critically and thoroughly at all our armed forces capabilities, our military capabilities, and came out with an excoriating report, which was public through the Financial Times last week. And Patrick Sanders and myself have been echoing this. It's what we've always known, but now the Ministry of Defence itself is saying that our capability is very, very run down, that our capacity to sustain anything more than a small operation for any length of time is very, very low. And this boosts the call to increase our defence expenditure to 2.5% as soon as possible and go beyond that to 3% at least, again, as soon as possible. Of course, this is a major challenge for any government, and particularly for this new government. They don't want to raise taxes. They've got other spending priorities. But frankly, as we've always known and always said, the security of this country, the security of the people of this country is first and foremost.
And yet, Lord Dannett, we know the nature of war is changing. In the last 3 years alone, the asymmetry of warfare has increased almost exponentially. It's now easy, or perhaps far more easy than ever before, to take out multi-million-pound equipment with equipment that only costs a few thousands of pounds. Surely, before we need to talk about many more billions going into the army, we need a thorough strategic review of what it's actually being spent on.
Well, that would be a great luxury, wouldn't it? To spend a year having an academic discussion about what we already know is the reality of the situation. Yes, of course, the new government should have a strategic defence review. I'm afraid I'm old enough to remember the strategic defence review of 97-98 when Tony Blair and George Robertson came into the defence world. I was the director of the defence programme staff at the time. But the difference then in 97-98 was the world was actually pretty stable. Where we are now is the world is very unstable. There is a proven aggressor in Europe. There are major issues in the Middle East. There are threats from China over Taiwan, threats in the Far East, in the Indo-Pacific region. So there isn't time to waste to have the luxury of an in-depth defence review before deciding to spend more. Yes, spending more is one thing, spending better is another. And something that this government will be very well advised to do is not to rubbish the recent review of our procurement process, which the outgoing government did earlier on this year and published in February this year. It was frankly a very good piece of work. So my message really is which is the same as Patrick Sanders, same as Dr. Rob Johnson, is we know we've got to spend more. Let's get on with doing it. Let's spend more, let's spend better. But frankly, we haven't got the luxury of time, which waiting a year to come up with the conclusions of a defence review would rather suggest.
And how do you suspect Sir Keir Starmer will show up at this NATO summit? How do you suspect he'll carry himself? One of the things that he was complimentary about Boris Johnson about was the way that he led when it came to Ukraine. Do you suspect Sir Keir Starmer will carry that mantle well?
Well, on Ukraine, absolutely. Starting with Boris Johnson and going through Rishi Sunak, and now I'm sure onto Keir Starmer as well. We will want to show to Ukraine, we want to show to other European allies and to the Americans that we, the Brits, stand foursquare behind the Ukrainians and will continue to do so. I think Keir Starmer will represent this country very well at the NATO summit. It's going to be an interesting summit, given that it's chaired by Joe Biden, who we all know is struggling for his own credibility at the present moment. But it's an important summit. It commemorates 75 years of the NATO alliance, which is an incredibly important alliance that's been guaranteeing the security of Europe, really ever since the end of the Second World War.
And just finally, of course, it might not be that Joe Biden is president for much longer. Donald Trump is leading in the opinion polls. He's someone that's questioned the merit of collective defence within NATO if various members of NATO aren't paying their 2% target. Is that fundamental core tenet of what NATO is about now on threat?
Well, there are elements of threat there. I don't think Donald Trump would go so far as to take the United States out of NATO, but where he's right is that European countries must step up and they must pay more. You mentioned 2%. 2% is the minimum target. It's not the maximum target. And there are too many countries still well underneath that 2% figure. But for countries that really want to play a major role and take the threats to our security in Europe seriously, then moving to 2.5% or the 3% is where we really ought to be going. Remember, in the Cold War, we were spending between 4 and 5%. And because we had that degree of deterrence, the Cold War never turned hot. My goodness, the heat's on now.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. General Lord Dannett, former head of the British Army. Great to get your perspective on all that.
Yeah, really profound stuff to think about there. But coming up, Keir Starmer kickstarts a major programme of devolution, meeting Metro mayors in Downing Street this morning. But what does it mean for us and our taxes? Well, we'll have more after this short break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm joined by showbiz journalist Steph Tetchy and the author Suze Holder. Welcome to you both. Ladies, right, what's top of the menu? What we got?
Oh, well, we've got this story about Elvis Presley and his blue suede shoes, Susan.
Yes, well, I am a huge, huge Elvis fan.
Me too.
And if I don't get home and find those blue suede shoes kind of wrapped up for me, waiting for me, but they did go for £120,000, so possibly they won't be waiting for me, but oh my goodness, what a thing that somebody has actually managed to get those. So, yeah, so Elvis is obviously famous for a lot of things, but he did bring blue suede shoes out in the 1950s. He wore these shoes and they were auctioned at a place in Devizes yesterday. So I do just think it's key memorabilia for somebody who's an Elvis fan. There is an Elvis exhibition, do you know, at the moment. Have you been to that yet?
No, where is it?
You should get yourself down there. It's at London Bridge, and lots of things from Graceland are actually on exhibition there. So the blue suede shoes won't be there because they'll be. We don't know who's bought
the
them.
owner.
Somebody will have bought them. But his gold suit, which is also a very, very famous thing. He had a foil gold suit.
Is that there at this display?
It's at this display.
How's Graceland? Is it good?
I'd live there. You know what it is? It's an amazing place because you can visit so many places that people have been, or like you go to the White House, lots of presidents have been there, or you go to other places. This is a home. And although it's kind of wacky, crazy, amazing, it does feel like a family home. There's not many places you can visit that is so connected to a person.
Elvis Presley, blue suede shoes. If you're minted, 120 grand for a pair of those, that's a snip.
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah, absolutely.
I thought they would have gone for millions.
Same here. Yeah, and they are authenticated. They were given away by Elvis. He gave away an awful lot of things. He gave it to one of his guys, one of the Memphis Mafia, Alan Fortas.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 12. Now, this morning, all 11 regional mayors in England came together at Downing Street to start this programme of devolution under Sir Keir Starmer's new government.
Yes, well, the Prime Minister said he believed that those with skin in the game are the ones who know best what they need, and reportedly discussed a new partnership approach with the region. So what does this all mean?
Well, delighted to be joined now by Senior Lecturer in British Politics at the University of Liverpool, Dr David Jeffrey. David, this is a very interesting tack because it's something that Keir Starmer mentioned briefly in the election campaign, but we haven't heard much detail. What sorts of new powers might be coming to local mayors?
Well, there'll be a range, I think, over things like transport, infrastructure, and how funding is calculated and delivered to the Metro mayors. So we'll probably see some sort of funding settlement similar to West Midlands and Greater Manchester, whereby mayors don't have to bid for individual pots, but instead are just given all of the money together and say, spend on it what you will. And hopefully that will be used in a more efficient way, so the theory goes.
What evidence is there to suggest that it will be?
Well, not much, actually, but the hope is that because you have these mayors accountable to local electorates, they're more likely to spend more efficiently than, say, Whitehall. But, you know, this is obviously in massive contradiction to the things announced by Rachel Reeves previously about how central government will play a much greater role in the planning process. So Starmer's trying to have it both ways here by empowering local areas, but not empowering them too much in case they do things he doesn't like.
It's interesting. Perhaps we're going to see not just devolution whereby sort of local authorities get more power, and not just sort of centralisation where Whitehall gets more power, but perhaps a coming together in the middle with these combined authorities, taking planning powers away from smaller local councils and councillors towards these metro mayors, and perhaps reserving Whitehall powers for only nationally significant projects. I mean, that does seem like a potential form of this sort of planning reform that they've been talking about.
I think that's exactly what we'll see. Obviously, central government is not keen on giving up powers, but they're more relaxed about local authorities losing their powers to these combined authorities. We saw this under the coalition era, and it's been quite popular amongst, well, certainly amongst the metro mayors for obvious reasons, but it's also quite popular in like kind of policy wonderland. And so there's very little pushback to this because actually council leaders don't have the capacity to do so.
I mean, will there really be any autonomy? The vast majority, all the mayors, bar one, are Labour. Surely they'll just do what the Labour agenda is.
Not necessarily. So some of them do have a reputation of being quite independent. So Andy Burnham, for instance, is quite happy to stick it to the Labour leadership when he thinks it's useful for him. But I think the real issue here, in international terms, is actually these combined authorities don't have much power at all. They don't really have a big budget, even though it seems like a lot to us internationally. It's small fry, the amount of money they get. So how much they can actually do with that money is limited.
The Conservative Party have just 121 MPs in the House of Commons now. The Reform Party have 5. The Labour Party has a vast majority with which it can do basically what it would like over the next 5 years. Could it be that actually opposition in the country starts to come from these areas with metro mayors, even if they're of the Labour Party? They're worried about their next election. Maybe there's going to be perhaps the crucible of where sort of opposition to a government agenda comes from, in a way that sometimes in the United States of America you see state governors of one party opposing a presidency of another party.
I think that's completely possible, certainly on specific areas. So it's unlikely you will see metro mayors pushing back on areas outside of their remit, so things like defence, for instance. But there will certainly be, I think, a push across all metro mayors to come together to try and get more powers. So as it stands, not all metro mayors are created equal, and some, like the West Midlands or Greater Manchester, have much more powers. The Mayor of London, who's not technically a metro mayor but was at the meeting, has even more powers. So I think we will see a call for more powers to kind of almost, if you like, levelling up the metro mayors so they all have an equal amount of influence in their area.
Yeah, I'd say there are 2 main issues that are reflected in our inbox on this. First, mayors are never happy with the powers that they have, so they always want more. And second, how much is all this additional bureaucracy, additional roles in local authorities and the mayor's office, etc., going to cost us?
Well, yeah, I mean, they are long-term gripes about the roles of metro mayors, and then also add to that, it's the low turnout. So the public do not seem enthused by these new positions. I mean, they're not as bad as the Police and Crime Commissioners that literally nobody cares about, but metro mayors still don't have a strong democratic mandate across the country. And so there are certainly areas where these mayors need to do more to win people over. Otherwise, serious questions could be asked about whether they're actually delivering the goods and whether people want them.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see what the actual powers will be, because it seems to be very murky so far. Not a lot of detail, but I suppose time will tell. Dr. David Jeffrey, thank you very much for... Oh, unless you wanted...
No.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for your time. Very interesting to talk to you about all this. As you say, it is a little bit vague at the moment. What I will say, I've been quite negative about this idea of more devolution and more power to mayors. Some of you, I will say, are getting in touch from Manchester or the surrounding area and saying that Andy Burnham, at least, has been good for Manchester as an advocate for that city and the area.
Do you remember during COVID, where he was actually basically the only person in any elected authority in the country who was pushing back against some of the government's impositions?
Yeah.
That shows, I think, that sometimes mayors can be these local champions.
I just worry down the line. You know, it may not happen in 5 years, but within a generation, an extremely fragmented United Kingdom. You know, devolution was supposed to keep us together, to stop the pursuit of independence in Scotland, Wales, etc. Instead, what did it do? It created more and more demands for more power and more independence. And I quite like the United Kingdom being united, but that's my view.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I think the big worry is when you have asymmetric devolution. When one part of the country has way more devolved power than another, then the rest it's all rushing towards the lowest common denominator. If there is a new structure where it's these are the rules, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, it's no longer in flux and it's sort of evenly spread across the country, I think potentially that then limits that grappling for more power if we have it crystallised in one act of Parliament.
I don't know. I think all the rules could be all over the place, depending on where you are in the country. Chaos. Anyway, let me know if you disagree. gbnews.com/your say. Coming up, Wes Streeting. He's meeting the BMA in a bid to end the mass NHS walkouts. We're going to bring you the latest from the Department of Health after your headlines with Mark White.
It's 12:32, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Well, in the last hour, 3 asylum seekers have ended their High Court legal action after the government scrapped the Rwanda deportation scheme. Lawyers for the people, who cannot be named for legal reasons, were told today that the cases would no longer continue. According to the Home Office, their legal costs will now be paid for by the taxpayer. It comes after the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, branded the policy a con. Well, some breaking related news, and just a day after the first Channel migrants arrived since the Labour government took power, more small boats are crossing today. 65 migrants arrived in one small boat on Monday. Today, 2 Border Force vessels and a lifeboat have arrived in Dover Harbour with more than 200 migrants on board. Several other boats have been spotted in the Channel and are being intercepted by Border Force vessels. Labour has vowed to end small boat crossings by going after the criminal gangs. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. Well, the new Cabinet was meeting this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers arrived in Downing Street to discuss Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. And tonight, the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between Britain and the US. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in reserves. It needs new funds to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. Well, those are the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2809 and €1.1837. The price of gold is £1,844.54 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,175 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Rain moves north today, a dreary day in many places with some very soggy weather around. Increasingly humid in the south, meanwhile, where we did see some persistent wet weather through the day on Monday. That wet weather is now moving north into southern and central Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. Some heavy and prolonged outbreaks of rain here, quite a breeze as well, so all in all a miserable day to come. A lot of cloud across the UK with some heavy showers developing through central and southern parts of the UK. And it's going to feel a bit more humid in the south with highs of 20 or 21 Celsius. Some brightness will come through from time to time, but the brightest skies will actually be across northern Scotland, where it will be largely dry, aside from the odd shower. And it will be on the cool side, 13 to 14 Celsius, but a lot more pleasant than further south into the central belt, where the rain turns heavier into the evening, with that rain continuing for much of the afternoon, evening and overnight. Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain, heavy showers through northern England as well as the east of England, some brighter skies emerging for Wales and the southwest early evening. But for many places we keep a lot of low cloud and a gloomy feel to the day. Now overnight the rain continues on its journey north into northern Scotland, but it also carries on raining across Northern Ireland and Northern England, showers further south and a mild night to come with 13 to 15 Celsius for many places. But we start off Wednesday again with a lot of cloud cover, further showers or longer spells of rain for many places. Now for southern parts it will brighten up into the afternoon with conditions ending up mostly dry. Plenty of sunshine for the far south, but in the far north the rain continues and it's going to be very wet for northeast Scotland, with the risk of localised flooding.
The latest GB News travel.
Northbound on the M3, severe delays and a lane closure whilst recovery work takes place following an accident from 3 for Lightwater and Bagshot to 2 for the M25 interchange. Northbound on the M1 there's a lane closure on the exit slip road to junction 11 for Dunstable South and Luton, again to an accident, delays at Luton Airport Spur Road at junction 10. Clockwise on the M25 there's a lane closure on the exit slip road at Brentwood, 28 to a broken down vehicle. Anti-clockwise on the M25 slow to an accident at junction 27, even though the vehicles are on the hard shoulder, delays still remain. And the eastbound side of the M4 that has a lane closure on the exit slip road to Cheveley at junction 13, though traffic is coping well through that accident. So that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 20 to 1, and the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is to commence face-to-face talks with the British Medical Association in a bid to end the strike action and discuss reform.
Well, junior doctors went on strike for 5 full days at the end of June, marking the 11th such walkout in just 20 months. So what can we expect from these discussions today? Could a new government finally bring an end to the industrial action? Could it prove, whatever happens, that this is ever so slightly political?
And just how much might it cost us all? Well, let's pose these questions to our reporter Charlie Peters, who joins us outside the Department of Health. And Charlie, we're given to understand that these talks haven't yet taken place. These people have yet to arrive.
That's right, Tom. The BMA are just waiting around the corner. They're expected to arrive shortly. As you just asked in your intro, could we see some decision made today on this long-running dispute between the government and the BMA's Junior Doctors Committee? Well, I think it's highly unlikely that we will. Both sides, the Department for Health and Social Care and the BMA, playing down the possibility of an outcome being achieved that would end this long-running dispute. As you say, 11 strike actions across 20 months. The most recent saw some 62,000 appointments cancelled as 23,000 staff were out of work during that 5-day period. But despite them playing down the possibility of an outcome today, Wes Streeting will need to act quickly because the Health Secretary knows that the current mandate for strikes lasts until just September the 19th. With Parliament going into recess at the end of this month, that's not a lot of time to get things turned around, and this new government will not want this dispute to stretch into the spring, when a new ballot could see strike action mandated until that period. What are they asking for? Well, the junior doctors, they want a 35% pay increase, something to match what they had in 2008. They say there's been roughly a quarter real-time pay decline in that period. And earlier today, GB News' Anna Riley in Hull asked people what they thought about the junior doctors' demands.
That's one of their big pledges, isn't it, to help out the NHS? And I guess it must be dispiriting for junior doctors. You hear this stuff on the news where they've just finished a 12-hour shift. They've gone home and on the way home stopped to get a coffee. And the people at the coffee shops earn more per hour than what they do.
I don't think they should go on strike because there's people in the hospital what need help and them getting told to wait 10-15 hours. I think the doctors shouldn't go on strike, they get enough money as theirs.
I don't think they'll strike a deal because it's all to do with pay. They're all greedy, they all just keep wanting more and more money. Where's the love in the world? I'm at hospital all the time, do you know what I mean? The doctors are on strike, I'm sat there for 12-13 hours.
Well, Wes Streeting has said that there is space for discussion on this issue. That's, of course, why they're meeting post-lunch to get things started on a new round of negotiations between this new Labour government and the BMA. And Philip Banfield, a professor, co-chair of the BMA's council, has said that the Labour government is on a journey and treating this as a journey for dealing with the pay disputes, which does suggest that perhaps Labour will offer a significantly lower percentage than that 35, but enough to satisfy the current level of anger and the dispute with the junior doctors. It's worth pointing out that in the last round of strikes in Scotland, they didn't have the same walkout of junior medics, and that's because they accepted a pay deal with the Scottish government of 12.4%. Could that be the same number we see in England and Wales?
Goodness me, down from 35 to 12.4. Well, we'll keep an eye close on these negotiations and see what happens. Charlie Peters, thank you very much.
You see where the money comes from. As you said to me, not earmarked in the manifesto, any increase.
No. So does it come out of the general NHS budget, or are there going to be tax rises to pay for it?
More borrowing. But that's a given. Coming up, we'll be talking to former Premier League player Jimmy Ballard as England gear up to face the Netherlands in the Euros semi-final tomorrow. You won't want to miss it.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back. Stefan Kyriazis has, as ever, been to the theatre and saw one of the most successful performers of the modern age, one who has made his name in different genres on television and is always a magnetic presence on the stage. About whom are we talking, Stefan?
We're talking about James Corden at the Old Vic for The Constituent and its Traverse staging. So audience on either side, and it's a fantastic experience. But also it's been done this time to bring everything in a lot and make it quite intimate, because you just have one simple set. It's just a table, office space. This is a new play by Joe Penhall, and it's addressing very, very current issues of safety, especially for people in public service. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and of course, as you know, politicians that are at risk and being attacked. So we have Joe Cox, Sir David Ames, and we have politicians talking about cancelling their surgeries, not wanting to appear in public, teachers being threatened. And James Corden plays an ex-serviceman who is going through a difficult divorce, dealing with a lot of PTSD, also feeling very much like fathers are overlooked, and he wants to fight for their rights. And an old school friend is a local MP, played by Anna Maxwell Martin. And he goes in to start talking to her, and it starts off quite chummy and jovial, and then it darkens and darkens. He gets quite aggressive and frustrated. She wants to help. She's an absolute idealist. This politician sense of we don't choose who we work for. You know, we are here by duty to work for everybody in our constituency. It spirals a lot. I have to say, Corden, sensational. Really? He really is a fantastic actor. Of all of them, he's so natural, and he has the most difficult role where his character is shifting all the time and becomes potentially quite threatening and dangerous, but then there's also a beautiful catharsis at the end.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 12:47. Let's end the hour by heading to Germany. The big game is, of course, tomorrow, but there are 2 semi-finals, and tonight Spain face France to find out who will play the Three Lions should they progress tomorrow night against the Netherlands.
Well, our man on the ground in Dortmund is Jack Carson, and he joins us now. Jack, is the temperature rising?
Well, given it's 30 degrees here in Dortmund, Tom, it definitely is. It's absolutely boiling and sweltering, but we are hopefully in for a scorcher here in Dortmund tomorrow. The atmosphere is building, lots of anticipation here in the city, of course, for England's semi-final, and also those eyes on, of course, the other semi-final tonight, Spain versus France, as to who, as you rightly said, England might well be facing if they're lucky enough. But come and talk to a couple of England fans with me that have already made it out here to Dortmund. We've got Tom and Joe. Going to go to Tom first. Tom, tell us then, this is your first time out, you said, in Germany. I mean, how are you feeling about this semi-final?
I'm buzzing for it, to be honest. A bit nervous, but yeah, buzzing.
I mean, how do you reckon, the team have played so far? It's been a lot of criticism on Southgate.
Yeah, it's a bit mediocre, but we've got to semi-final, so it's clearly good enough.
Yeah. I mean, who are you kind of looking for as maybe the person that might make the difference on the pitch tomorrow?
Well, Saka did it last game, so hopefully one of them lot can do it again.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. We're now going to go to Joe. Joe, tell me, mate, how you feeling ahead of this semi-final?
I'm nervous, but I'm really excited for it. I'm not sure who'll win in end, so yeah, I'm excited, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Luke Shaw made an appearance, again. For you, does he come straight in as the kind of the only fit left back?
I'm not really sure because he's been injured since like February, hasn't he? But we could do with him because we need a left footer on the left-hand side to make it easier to get up pitch.
All right, and a quick score prediction from you?
2-1 England.
2-1 England. Tom, we'll come back to you quickly for a quick score prediction.
1-1 England penalties.
1-1 again?
Yeah.
Cool, you've got some confidence. Right, there you go. There's Tom and Joe there talking to us live from Dortmund, of course. There's loads of tens of thousands of England fans meant to be coming here. 30,000 meant to be coming to this city over the next 24 hours, and we'll bring you all of it throughout the day.
Brilliant stuff, Jack Carson. Thank you very much. Live in Dortmund with some fans who've got there a little bit early.
Yeah, their friends must be very jealous. Now, the former Premier League former Premier League player Jimmy Bullard joins us now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jimmy. So, what are your predictions for tomorrow?
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having us. My predictions for tomorrow are I'm going big. England 3-1. I think there's going to be a lot of goals in the game. I think you're going to see a different game. I just think it's been so tight in the league, sort of. When it was in the group stages, it was just so tight, wasn't it? And I just think you're going to see a different game now when England v Holland. I think you can see an open game with plenty of goals.
Are we going to see some personnel changes, or is this now, have we found the right squad? There's been a huge amount of controversy over who's playing where and who's being brought on, or frankly, who's not being brought on. What do you make of it?
Absolutely too much, in my opinion. I think he's going to stay with the same team. I don't think he can change. I think that's probably the best performance in this campaign we've seen. So I just don't see how he's going to change. I think Konza's the only one. If he is going to make a change, that's going to be changed. But even he played so well. But yeah, this is going to be a fantastic game. It's going to be open, I predict. And yeah, I just want you all to get behind the boys and give them some good support because we need you.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't go to penalties again. I'm not sure I can cope.
Nah.
I'm not sure the nation can cope with that kind of stress. Watching it through our fingers. Want to know what your take is on this German referee. There's been a bit of controversy, been done for fixing matches in the past.
Yeah, there's been a lot talked about this. Do you know what? Referees never bothered me, and I don't think it's going to bother the boys. It's about getting out there, you know. We're at this stage, you're in the semi-final. Can a referee really affect your game at that level? I suppose it can do, but I don't think it's going to affect us. I think it's just about what we do, and hopefully we score plenty of goals because that's what's going to get us through ultimately.
Well, it's not just the referee that perhaps we need to worry about, but also the fans. I mean, there's going to be about a 4-to-1 ratio of Dutch fans versus England fans, particularly in that famous yellow wall in the stadium. Well, that's the numbers because, of course, the location is so close to the Netherlands. We're expecting many, many more Dutch fans.
Surely not.
In your experience, your professional experience, does that sort of ratio matter?
It will make an impact. Yeah, absolutely. You want to hear your fans more than the other fans. Absolutely. I can't believe that. It's the first time I've heard that. 4-to-1's a lot.
I think that might have been those in the city rather than in the stadium. I might have got that.
Okay.
So those just around and about. Perhaps the stadium's a bit more balanced.
Right. Okay. I have seen some online stuff with the Dutch marching up and down the streets. Looks great, by the way, with their dance. But in the stadium, what's going to count? That's all what the boys are going to hear. So, absolutely. I think if the fans can get behind the boys, it'll make a real difference. Sometimes can be the 12th man, you know.
Well, Jimmy, just quickly, do you think the fans have been letting the team down a bit? Do you think they should be a bit more positive?
Do you know what? Yeah, they're a little bit over the top in the early stages. A little bit uncalled for, you know, the booing at early stage in a tournament and also early stage in a game, and then leaving before, you know, in a knockout stage. Look, they buy their own ticket. It comes to a right few quid, but I just want to see the fans get behind, and that's why I'm here promoting in a lovely Green King pub, because what we're putting on tomorrow is we're doing a nice special. So when England score, Green King, we're giving away a pint to every fan when England score. So go in your local Green King pub, support the boys, get behind Gareth. There is a code word, by the way. Right, and the code word is England scored, please pour. So when you go in there, because England will score. We love supporting our great English pubs.
Jimmy Bullard, legend, thank you so much for joining us and talking through that big game tomorrow.
Yes, stay with us. We're going to be discussing whether it's okay to say someone looks nice in the workplace. I tell you all the time, don't I, Tom?
Certainly do.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Rain moves north today, a dreary day in many places with some very soggy weather around. Increasingly humid in the south, meanwhile, where we did see some persistent wet weather through the day on Monday. That wet weather is now moving north into southern and central Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. Some heavy and prolonged outbreaks of rain here. Quite a breeze as well, so all in all, a miserable day to come. A lot of cloud across the UK with some heavy showers developing through central and southern parts of the UK. And it's going to feel a bit more humid in the south with highs of 20 or 21 Celsius. Some brightness will come through from time to time, but the brightest skies will actually be across northern Scotland, where it will be largely dry, aside from the odd shower, and it will be on the cool side, 13 to 14 Celsius, but a lot more pleasant than further south into the central belt, where the rain turns heavier into the evening, with that rain continuing for much of the afternoon, evening and overnight. Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain, heavy showers through northern England as well as the east of England, some brighter skies emerging for Wales and the southwest early evening, but for many places we keep a lot of low cloud and a gloomy feel to the day. Now overnight the rain continues on its journey north into northern Scotland, but it also carries on raining across Northern Ireland and Northern England, showers further south and a mild night to come with 13 to 15 Celsius for many places. But we start off Wednesday again with a lot of cloud cover, further showers or longer spells of rain for many places. Now for southern parts it will brighten up into the afternoon with conditions ending up mostly dry. Plenty of sunshine for the far south, but in the far north the rain continues and it's going to be very wet for northeast Scotland with the risk of localised flooding.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far and it could be yours. Phil was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox. I just looked at my account and thought, oh my God, yeah, it's true, it's gone into my account. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm joined now by Stefan Kyriasis to give us the latest on everything theatre.
So, yeah, we're going in first with Starlight Express, which is back. It's not in the West End. It's out at Wembley at the Troubadour Theatre, which is a big, almost kind of warehouse space, which suits because, as you know, have you seen the show?
Starlight Express was my first ever musical. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old. I only saw it once, but I remember it being magical.
Well, this one, it's 1984 it started, and it's still running in Bochum in Germany in a huge arena. So basically what we've got, they've slightly tweaked it, and there's a little boy or little girl, depending on the cast, going to bed, obsessed with toy trains and dreaming of trains. Everybody is dressed up. To me, it looks like a cross between Tron and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I don't really think any of them look remotely like a train, but hey, the songs are Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's pop mixed with kind of cod 1950s rock and roll, some power ballads. The lyrics are politely like something out of an old speak and spell machine or something, you know. He's a steam train, they're out of date, he's being bullied by the diesel and the electric, and he falls for this carriage, the first-class carriage, new girl Pearl, and he wants to impress her, so he enters a race, and that's pretty much it. And when the races happen, all these barriers come up around where we're sitting, the lights are flashing, the music's thumping. It's utterly ridiculous, and I felt like a kind of teenager that was huffing sherbet dib-dabs off a giant block of sugar. It's so much fun, and the really crucial thing about it all is that somehow in the middle of all of that, I just felt myself getting into the story. And when Pearl and Rusty have their little duet, I was very moved, and there's this big starlight sequence, which is the inspiration, the magical starlight that he's seeking. It's beautiful.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 9th of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
So who's got the power? The Prime Minister meets Metro mayors in Downing Street with a promise to push power away from Whitehall. But is this just a further layer of meddling, tax-raising politicians?
And NATO calls. This evening, Keir Starmer flies to Washington for his first summit as Prime Minister. He's under pressure to raise defence spending, a promise he refused to commit to during the election campaign.
And why are England fans fuming over the choice of this German referee to take charge of tomorrow's semi-final showdown with the Netherlands? We'll reveal it.
And this afternoon, we're going to see Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak together in Parliament for the first time since the election. We'll be live for the ceremonial selection of the Speaker of the House of Commons.
And is telling a female colleague that they look nice sexual harassment, Tom?
You look nice, Emily.
Oh, I'm going to get in touch with HR.
Do you feel harassed?
I'm going to get in touch with HR. No, thank you very much. I will accept that compliment. I will accept that compliment.
I see. So you're on the sort of rational human being side of the argument rather than the sort of everything is insane side of the argument.
Well, we're talking about this because there's been an employment tribunal, and this was one of the things that was flagged as creating an intimidatory atmosphere in the workplace, akin to sexual harassment, a compliment.
Doesn't it matter who you are, though? I mean, like throwing pebbles at someone's window is all very sweet if they're a sort of, you know, Romeo-style young, handsome man. if they're a bit portly and sort of toad-like, and they're throwing pebbles at your window, you're going to call the police, aren't you? I mean, like, this is entirely context-dependent. Romantic gestures for, frankly, attractive people are all very welcome, but you know, unattractive people doing romantic gestures—that's sexual harassment. That's the blunt truth of it.
Beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, Tom. Someone might throw pebbles at your window one day.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
I'm pebbleless.
Let us know, has this all gone a bit too far? Are you scared to give a compliment in the workplace now for fear that someone might say you're harassing me? It's all a bit much, isn't it?
I think a lot of people are scared, because if you look at the number of relationships that now start in the office, it's been falling and falling and falling. I mean, people are resorting to applications. They don't meet people in person. They need sort of, you know, written consent before saying or doing anything.
I remember a former colleague said he liked my skirt and then immediately said, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And it was a very nice skirt. Anyway, gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But let's get the headlines with Mark White.
Just after 1 o'clock, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. 3 asylum seekers have ended their High Court legal action after the government scrapped the Rwanda deportation scheme. Lawyers for the people who cannot be named for legal reasons were told today that the cases would no longer continue. According to the Home Office, their legal costs will now be paid for by the taxpayer. It comes after Home Secretary Yvette Cooper branded the Rwanda policy a con. Meanwhile, just a day after the first Channel migrants arrived since the Labour government took power, more small boats are crossing today. 65 migrants arrived in one small boat on Monday. Today, 2 Border Force vessels and a lifeboat arrived in Dover Harbour with more than 200 migrants on board. Several other boats have been spotted in the Channel and are being intercepted by Border Force vessels. Labour has vowed to end small boat crossings by going after the criminal gangs. Well, in the next couple of hours, Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years, when Parliament returns this afternoon. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. The new Cabinet met this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers departed Downing Street after discussing Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda are moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. And tonight the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Labour leader has already pledged his unshakable support for the alliance. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between Britain and America. Pay negotiations are set to get underway shortly between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association are due to meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has previously said he would not agree to demands for a 35% pay rise. Well, some breaking news just in. The technology innovation company Dyson is to cut up to 1,000 jobs as part of a global restructure. Wiltshire-based engineering firm employs 3,500 people across the UK and is best known for the invention of the bagless vacuum cleaner. Well, the Prime Minister said the government will set up a council for regions and nations during a meeting with mayors in Downing Street. A warning for those watching on TV: the following footage contains some flash photography. Greater Manchester's Andy Burnham and Mayor of London Sadiq Khan were among those who attended this morning. Sir Keir said he's planning to loosen Whitehall's tight grip over big cities and regions through a new partnership approach. It follows warnings by the Local Government Association of a £6 billion funding gap in the local authority sector. Conservative Mayor of the Tees Valley, Ben Houchin, told GB News the meeting went well.
It was very positive, actually. I was really pleasantly surprised that he was really energetic, really keen. He wanted to work with us, and he was very open to the idea of much more devolution, which has changed with different prime ministers over the last 10 or 15 years, depending on which one it is. So ultimately, we're going to have to keep him to his word. If he keeps his promises, then it looks very promising for further devolution, and ultimately, it looks very promising that we can get on and deliver for our regions.
Thames Water says it will run out of money by the end of next May unless it can get further funding. Britain's biggest water firm, which is in debt by more than £15 billion, has just £1.8 billion in cash reserves. It needs new funds to maintain and update its infrastructure after investors pulled the plug on £500 million of emergency cash earlier this year. It could leave the new Labour government with a difficult decision over whether to nationalise it, something they have said they will not do. 3 people have been arrested after a man was shot dead in Walsall in the West Midlands. The victim, who was in his 20s, died at the scene. Another man was also wounded and is receiving treatment to his injuries, which are not believed to be life-threatening. All 3 men arrested remain in custody as West Midlands police detectives continue with their investigation. Craig Bellamy has been named as the new Wales football manager. The former Liverpool forward replaces Rob Page, who was sacked in June after Wales failed to qualify for the Euros. The 44-year-old said he will give his full commitment to develop the Wales team and can't wait to get started with the Nations League games in September. And the best of luck to Craig Bellamy there. Those are the headlines for the moment. More news for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, 1:09, good afternoon, Britain. And Sir Keir Starmer has today promised to build a real partnership with England's regional mayors following a meeting with them in Downing Street.
Well, the Prime Minister told them they were... I'm still trying to get used to thinking of Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister. It's going to trip me up every single time. But the Prime Minister told them they were absolutely central to economic growth across the country, with growing the economy being, of course, one of Labour's 5 missions for government.
And speaking after the meeting, London Mayor Sadiq Khan praised it as a statement of intent from Sir Keir, accusing the last government of pitting mayors against each other.
Goodness me. Well, let's go straight to GB News political editor Christopher Hope, live on Downing Street for us. Christopher, there is also a moving truck behind you. Let's start with this. Who's this for?
Well, you can probably guess it's the Starmers. They're moving in, it looks like. Now I'll just let Ollie pan away to that. That's the. They've got one moving truck behind it. This yellow one looks like to try and give them at least a degree of privacy from the GB News cameras. I'm not surprised. I think I'd do the same. They pay for 2. Looks like they pay for 2 trucks. We're not sure whether the yellow one has anything in it, and maybe the silver one has all the gear. But we saw, of course, Rishi Sunak move out yesterday or over the weekend, certainly, photographed some of his more expensive furniture emerging from some of the other cameras on Downing Street. So this is the nature of our democracy. While other countries take weeks and months to establish a new government after an election, we do it in a matter of hours, and I think that's rather marvellous.
It's interesting that they're also sort of preventing you from viewing. I can't imagine what sort of furniture the Starmers might have. I'm trying to imagine. Maybe they're going to rip out the wallpaper and put in something else. But we should get to the substance.
May I ask one more trivial question? And that is, how much space does the Prime Minister and his family actually have within number 10? Because, of course, there's so much other activity going on in there.
Well, Emily, what we don't know is which flat the Starmers are going to move into, because, of course, the flat above number 11 is much more roomy than the one above number 10. Now, Rishi Sunak lived with his family above 10 Downing Street. He always told us back then, when he was Prime Minister, he wanted to get some of the vibes, some of the kind of the vibes from when Margaret Thatcher lived there. And he used to have regular late-night whiskies with colleagues, didn't she, Margaret Thatcher? But before that, we knew Boris Johnson and his team lived above number 11 Downing Street, and we wonder whether that might be what they want to do. There's lots more space. I've been told it's about 2,500 square feet above 11 Downing Street, and number 10 is pretty big. I mean, it goes a long way back is the answer. So it's a lot of space. Living over the shop is all part of the way we do our politics in this country, and it's quite hard, I think, for the family to get any space. I know that if you order a pizza, for example, in Downing Street, it's often cold by the time it gets to you, because it has to go through the hut at the front gate with the police, and then it has to get to you. So it's not a normal way of living. And the other big issue for the Starmers is, of course, they've got 2 children whose identity has never been released to the media. We don't know who they are or their names. We know their genders, and that's it. And they'll be going to school from here. So how do they manage that privacy issue?
Yeah, real big questions. Of course, no one ever discussed who's going to get the number 11 flat or the number 10 flat until Tony Blair turned up in '97 and says, I want the bigger one.
Imagine having your Deliveroo security checked every
I know that Boris Johnson said that was his most frustrating and surprising thing about being Prime Minister. But, Chris, today, talking devolution, talking mayors, interesting that there's going to be this sort of beefing up of the role of mayors, and potentially this is where we're going to see opposition to government policy in the next 5 years.
Yes, ironically, the word levelling up has reportedly been removed today from the Housing, Local Government and Communities Department. That term levelling up, of course, was tied very closely with Boris Johnson's landslide victory in 2019. And whether he actually achieved that is one for the historians to negotiate and talk about. But that word has gone. But it does look like the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is trying to level up in the sense that he's giving a lot more powers, it seems, to the Metro mayors. 12 of them met in Downing Street for breakfast this morning, including Ben Houchin, of course, the Tory mayor for Tees Valley. He came and he gave an interview to my colleague Olivia Utley shortly after on GB News, and said he's quite pleased with the result and encouraged by the way that the Labour PM wants to work with the local mayors. And the PM has made clear in his half-9 cabinet meeting, his second in 3 days, that he wants to have that meeting around the country and ensure that this government is seen to be governing for all regions of the country, and that's to be welcomed, I think.
And are they going to be given any new tax-raising powers? Are they going to be given any more money? Are they just going to be able to make bigger decisions? Do we know the detail yet?
We don't know yet. We know what some of them are asking for. For example, Sadiq Khan, who's the Mayor of London, he's asking for more control over commuter rail services. Currently, they're, of course, controlled by private companies. But the policy of this government, as Louise Haigh told me, the Transport Secretary, on Saturday when I was standing in the same spot asking them questions as they went into cabinet meeting, I said, when do you want to renationalise the rail services? She said, as soon as possible. What that means is when these franchises come up for grabs after the current company has finished running them, they will revert to state hands. And I think the idea, for example, in London, is for London Mayor to take over the control or have a bigger say over the running of commuter services, because so many people travel into London and spend money there.
Named all the stops on the overground, so, you know, there's more to do. There's more to do. But also, Christopher, he's been banging the drum for rent controls. He really, really, really wants the power to control rents in London. Do you think it's a possibility that he could get that power in London?
He certainly could. I mean, the Renters Reform Bill never made it onto the statute book, so that whole space is wide open for some new government legislation, I think, and certainly that's what they're calling for. We do know, though, don't we, from Ireland and Dublin, that rent controls haven't worked out that well. It's created a shortage of rental properties for other young people. So while it might seem a good idea because rents have gone up because of often for private landlords, because of spiralling interest rates have forced them to put rents up, it may not be the easy answer which some people think it is, but no question that is one idea which has been pushed for, I think, by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan. We're going to wait, I think, for that kind of thing until the fiscal event, which is expected to be September, October time. After, well, right now, the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, is looking through the books and working out how much money the new Chancellor has to spend. We'll hear more of that in the autumn.
We know prices go up when too much money chases too few goods. Trying to artificially cap anything doesn't work because there isn't enough stuff. There needs to be more stuff. Anyway, interesting that Keir Starmer's using a brand of called Bishop's Move for his moving van. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak had Platinum Move.
Yes.
I don't know if that's because he had much more platinum to be moving in and out, or what we can read into that.
Well, Tom, if you look over in the corner, there is a Platinum Move vehicle there behind the Bishop's Move one. So I think that they could be using the same company. I don't know.
There we go. OK, perhaps my conspiracy theories need to be laid to rest there. Christopher Hope, thanks for joining us.
Right, let's get the thoughts of the leader of East Yorkshire Council and a board member of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, Anne Handley. And thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. Your immediate reaction to all this talk of further devolution, more power to Metro mayors?
Well, my first immediate thought, I have to say, is today you both look really nice. Just thought I'd throw that in. I watched you earlier and you were having a conversation about, should we say that? So it's say to you both, and that's the level playing field. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased to hear that, to be fair, that more devolution is coming down to regional areas. I think it's a really, really good move and one that I would certainly welcome, having been on this devolution deal now for just almost a year with Michael Gove and Jacob Young in actually getting a devolution, trying to get a devolution deal for Hull and East Riding.
That actually mean? What are we actually going to be seeing? What powers do you expect these mayors may have after this meeting today and after new legislation, of course, that they don't currently have?
Well, I would imagine that they were sat around the table a lot more with our new Prime Minister, working out what's best for their area, because at the end of the day, the Metro mayors are on the ground doing the work and they actually know what their area needs, with the greatest respect to Whitehall, and I mean this in a positive way. They're not as au fait with what happens on the ground as Metro mayors are, and I'm quite sure that the new Prime Minister, along with the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, will be listening closely to what people actually want.
OK, Anne, I'm really sorry, but your line is breaking up a little bit, so we'll have to end it there. But I look forward to speaking to you again very soon, I'm sure. Anne Handley is leader of East Yorkshire Council and a board member of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Sorry about that line. It's a bit echoey, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we got what she was saying, which was different areas will have different needs. Although I do wonder and I do worry if different mayors have different levels of powers. I worry about that sort of setup, because then you have bargaining and never-ending bargaining for more powers and different levels of power and asymmetric devolution. I don't think that's good. I think what would be better is if they all had the same level of power, the same level of authority. They couldn't argue about what powers they had, and they had to get to work using the powers that they do have, a much more stable environment for devolution.
I just think mayors lead to more vanity projects. I think, you know, there's sometimes less accountability, fragmentation. You know, you're going to have ULEZ scheme after ULEZ scheme, aren't you? You're going to have LTNs go mad. You're going to have more cycle lanes than you could shake a stick at, aren't you, Tom?
That wouldn't be a bad thing.
He's a cycle supremacist.
I think
he got a bike.
No, I think we should separate cars from bikes. I think cars would be better off if there aren't bikes in the way of the cars. I think happier roads are segregated roads.
Also, I'm a bit more sceptical. I don't think Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are doing this to try and take power away from themselves. I mean, do you really think that's the case? Is it not to solidify it in a different way?
Well, I think what Dr David Jeffrey was saying earlier, that actually this might not be power coming down from Whitehall to these Metro mayors. It might be power coming up from local authorities towards these... So it might not be Sir Keir Starmer actually giving away any power at all.
How many more job roles are there going to be? I mean, local authorities already spend huge amounts of money on pointless things.
There could be fewer jobs, because if instead of sort of, 6 different local authorities, it's one.
When are there ever fewer jobs, Tom?
Well, if you're taking the power away from all of these different local authorities and just giving it to one bigger combined authority, you could do it more efficiently. I can see the argument there.
I'm going to be sceptical. But I'm willing to have my mind changed, as ever.
Well, the devil will be in the detail, won't it? Coming up, is it OK to compliment in the workplace? And when does a comment on physical appearance go too far? Well, that's our debate coming up after this.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 1. We're just going to keep you waiting a little bit longer to have our debate on whether or not you're allowed to say you look nice to someone in the workplace, because for now there is something very important. In 1 hour's time, members of Parliament will be descending upon the House of Commons. They'll be performing all sorts of rituals, dragging a new speaker up to the Speaker's chair. And also we'll see Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer side by side, perhaps making some small talk for the first time since both men met each other on the election campaign trail.
Yes, so over the past 6 weeks, the mother of all parliaments has been gearing up for this transition to be as smooth as possible. So our reporter, Adam Cherry, found out what happens.
So, you're a new MP elected for the very first time. Congratulations, well done. You made it. You're here in Parliament. What actually happens when you get here? How do you find your way around? How do you even log into your email system? Fear not, we've got some answers for you. Or at least, I've spoken to the people who do. Take a look at this. New MPs are about to stroll into the iconic Palace of Westminster for the very first time. For many of them, this is a dream come true. Of course, starting a new job can be intimidating. Luckily, while Parliament was dissolved, the House administration team has been hard at work to prepare for the new kids on the block.
We have set up something called the New Members Reception Area here in Portcullis House, and at that we equip members with the information and the things that they need to get themselves up and running in their new role as parliamentarians. There will be induction activities, not just this New Members Reception Area. There'll be a chamber briefing when it'll be the first time that members sit in the chamber. They won't have been sworn in at that point, but we want to take them through the courtesies and conventions of that place so that they know a bit about everything from, you know, the enunciator bell sounding, how to ask a question, all of those sorts of things.
New members will enter through Cromwell Green and head to Westminster Hall. There, they will check in at reception, receive their welcome pack, and get paired with a seasoned buddy.
So that's an experienced member of House staff that will be able to help them navigate this place.
Westminster is a bit of a labyrinth, and new MPs often need a helping hand. Fortunately, the palace doorkeepers have got their backs. One of the things we kind of do as homework is I normally stay up at night and watch some of the election results come in, getting to know some of the new faces, what will come in. We also have the doorkeeper Bible of Book of Faces of members. They've got to do some learning as well, haven't they? So do they ever get lost? Do you have to help them, show them around? What's that like?
Some of the ones I've done before, it's a very exciting time with lots of new members. And yes, some of them will not have been on this building before, and it can be quite daunting, and they need guidance and help and assistance, and that's what we're all there for. You know, yes, they'll get to know us, but we've got to get to know them quicker. That's what doorkeepers are known for, you know.
So a busy few weeks ahead with a lot to learn. Just don't forget to smile for that class photo. Adam Cherry, GB News, London.
Oh, great stuff from Adam there. But you know what I'm finding slightly trepidatious?
Go on.
Learning all the new names of the hundreds of MPs that are going to be swarming into Westminster today.
You will though, won't you?
I've picked up a little book. This is the chamber directory of members, and if we look inside, you can just see page after page after page of new MPs, old MPs. The first pages, these are all red. These are all the new Labour MPs. Many of them the same, many of them new, hundreds new. And of course, the Speaker will have to be learning all of these names to call people in debates.
Yes, he will.
And you can just see there's the Conservatives and a lot more Lib Dems, a lot of new Lib Dems. You can tell from the backgrounds which ones are new and which ones were the old photos from the other end. And just about here, for the first time after 8 attempts, we've got a Mr Nigel Farage there on near the back with his Reform boys as well. They're partnered with DUP there. But no, it's an interesting challenge.
They're segregated by gender.
In this House of Commons publication, yes.
Yes, it's the women, then the men, then the women, then the men.
Yeah, I don't know why they do that.
As it goes by party.
I guess it's probably easier to sort of navigate it. They're also all ordered
so you don't
by...
make a mistake.
Yeah, I think maybe. They're also alphabetically ordered and ordered by party, so there's lots of ordering. But it's a lot of homework for a lot of people to sort of get to know the new class.
So this is your bedtime reading then, is it?
This is my bedtime reading.
Right, well, I should probably do this as well. I don't want you to show me up tomorrow, you know, when you're naming them all. Well, later in the show, actually, we haven't got much time.
Less than an hour until these people are swarming the green benches for the first time. It's going to be very exciting to see.
And where will Mr Farage sit?
Oh, that is the big question.
Where will he sit?
He'll be wherever he sits. They'll be the naughty seats.
The naughty seats. Right, well, after the headlines, we're going to be having that debate on what constitutes sexual harassment. Could it be telling a female colleague that they look nice? That's after your headlines with Mark White.
At 1:30, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. 3 asylum seekers have ended their High Court legal action after the government scrapped the Rwanda deportation scheme. Lawyers for the people who cannot be named for legal reasons were told today that the cases would no longer continue. According to the Home Office, their legal costs will now be paid for by the taxpayer. It comes after Home Secretary Yvette Cooper branded the Rwanda policy a con. Meanwhile, just a day after the first Channel migrants arrived since the Labour government took power, more small boats are crossing today. 65 migrants arrived in one small boat on Monday. Today, 3 Border Force vessels and a lifeboat have arrived in Dover Harbour with more than 200 migrants on board. Several other boats have been spotted in the Channel and are being intercepted by Border Force vessels. Labour has vowed to end small boat crossings by going after the criminal gangs. The technology innovation company Dyson is to cut up to 1,000 jobs as part of a global restructuring. The Wiltshire-based engineering firm employs 3,500 people across the UK and is best known for the invention of the bagless vacuum cleaner. The new cabinet met this morning for the second time in 3 days. Ministers arrived in Downing Street to discuss Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for the first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. And tonight, the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between the US and the UK. Pay negotiations are set to get underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association will meet Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Well, you're right up to date with the latest news headlines. We'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Rain moves north today, a dreary day in many places with some very soggy weather around. Increasingly humid in the south, meanwhile, where we did see some persistent wet weather through the day on Monday. That wet weather is now moving north into southern and central Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. Some heavy and prolonged outbreaks of rain here. Quite a breeze as well, so all in all, a miserable day to come. A lot of cloud across the UK with some heavy showers developing through central and southern parts of the UK. And it's going to feel a bit more humid in the south with highs of 20 or 21 Celsius. Some brightness will come through from time to time, but the brightest skies will actually be across northern Scotland, where it will be largely dry, aside from the odd shower. And it will be on the cool side, 13 to 14 Celsius, but a lot more pleasant than further south into the central belt, where the rain turns heavier into the evening, with that rain continuing for much of the afternoon, evening and overnight. Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain, heavy showers through northern England as well as the east of England, some brighter skies emerging for Wales and the southwest early evening. But for many places we keep a lot of low cloud and a gloomy feel to the day. Now overnight the rain continues on its journey north into northern Scotland, but it also carries on raining across Northern Ireland and Northern England, showers further south and a mild night to come with 13 to 15 Celsius for many places. But we start off Wednesday again with a lot of cloud cover, further showers or longer spells of rain for many places. Now for southern parts it will brighten up into the afternoon with conditions ending up mostly dry. Plenty of sunshine for the far south, but in the far north the rain continues and it's going to be very wet for northeast Scotland, with the risk of localised flooding.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Anti-clockwise M25 is queuing 2 lanes out before Wisley at 10. Heavy back to Chertsey at 11. A 3-vehicle collision there causing delays. All manner of issues for the northbound A24 in Surrey. Now, it's closed firstly due to a spillage from Dorking at the Deep Dean roundabout through toward Leatherhead. Also on the northbound side, shut from Young Street up toward the Beaverbrook roundabout, and northbound too. The Horsham Road shut from the Bear Green roundabout through towards Chart Lane South in Dorking. This is all due to an oil spillage, so surrounding routes are queuing. This also means the Cobham services are closed on the M25 as well, so naturally very, very slow traffic on that route. And if you're heading towards Carmarthenshire, Llangadog, the A4069, that's closed.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:36. Now, an employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant, but I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice, why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things, and if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable, that's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
Yes, we don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not, and as far as I can see this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous. If it's part of a pattern of a lot of other things, then it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think to have it included by the tribunal and saying this is sexual harassment, I think is wrong, and I think its work isn't gone completely mad.
Rebecca Reid, is this a problem here, that including this as one of the strikes against this guy who seemingly did other things as well, perhaps the next person who comes along could use that alone to then launch a tribunal? Are we at the thin end of a wedge here?
No, I don't think we are. Very often when I come in on Wednesday night to do Patrick's show at GBN, I will say to one of my friends who is a producer that, oh my God, you look amazing. I love that outfit. I love your shoes, whatever. I do that most weeks because she always looks great. There is not a world in which I'm going to get a letter next week saying that I've been sexually harassing her, because I'm not. And the problem is we often talk about hypotheticals when women are trying to assert themselves when they have been sexually harassed, as this woman has. But realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place. And we have to deal with the reality of what women tend to do, not the hypotheticals of what they could do in the future.
I just worry, Christine, that it can create an atmosphere whereby men are worried about saying anything. I mean, I've been complimented on my skirt before by a male colleague, not here, elsewhere, and he immediately said, oh, I shouldn't have said that. It was a lovely skirt.
And I bet you look fabulous in it, but I probably shouldn't say that either. I think if you take it out of the work context, if you go to the real world, how young men ever advance any sort of relationship with a young woman, I have no idea nowadays, because they're not allowed to look at her, they're not allowed to say she looks nice, they're not allowed to do anything. And I just don't know how it is of making any sort of advance to a young woman. And the days when, you know, if somebody gave you a compliment, you just accepted it. If you look nice, you look nice. Thank you very much. I love it when people compliment me. Wish my husband did it a bit more often. saying that this particular example, he does sound that he was rather creepy, frankly, this fellow, and it was a very unequal power balance. So the combination of everything was probably not nice at all. But I do worry about the general situation when normal people just going about their social lives, the young men are terrified of putting a foot wrong and being accused of goodness knows what and where that might end.
Is there a risk here that some, frankly, obscene actions from a small group of men sort of make other young men feel that they just don't know what they can do and what they can't do and whether they should be talking to women at all, frankly, and it makes everything perhaps very awkward because so many cues and sort of flirtatious things are not spoken. They're sort of... It's very hard to sort of make a formula for relationships.
I'm not sure.
Sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
I'm not sure who you were addressing that to. Yes, Rebecca.
I don't think that that's a real world problem. I mean, when I was most recently dating, I was being sent obscene images of men's genitals most days. There was not an issue with men being backwards and coming forwards.
But if it's the men who send their genitals who feel like they won't, no matter what the social norms and cues are, they're going to do that. It's the people who perhaps aren't even talking to you who are scared off by those people.
These were not these were normal men, and B, this was dozens and dozens and dozens of men. So yes, I do think there is an issue in the social contract, but a lot of it is not men being too backwards, it's men being too emboldened behind screens and not emboldened enough perhaps in real life. But I refuse to believe that your average man in this country is too silly to know that saying to a woman who's been having a nice chat with, I like your skirt, is different from saying you look nice in a creepy way to their employee. I think most men are good and decent and are perfectly capable of reading that room.
And Christine, is it not a good thing that women feel more empowered in the workplace, that they won't put up with sleazy men?
Of course it is, and we've come a long way in the right direction as far as all that's concerned. I do think Rebecca describes as normal dozens of men who send pictures of their genitals to somebody they're meeting on a dating app. I would regard that as normal. It's a long time since I've been dating, probably 50 years, but it's normal behaviour. I find it extraordinary. Give me normal behaviour, which is a little bit more reticence, please.
I completely agree.
Well, we can agree with that. Thank you both for that debate, Rebecca Reid and, of course, Christine Hamilton. Great to speak to you both. Yes, good grief. Do not send pictures of your private parts.
No, you'd think that people could avoid doing that, especially to people they don't know. Rebecca Reid and Christine Hamilton both looked lovely there, by the way.
Goodness me. Now, do we have time for this? This Friday, GB News will have live coverage of the 12th of July celebrations in Northern Ireland. Now, GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie has been looking not only at the celebrations, but the effect they have right across the world. In this second report, he examines how, after the war, many left for the New World.
On April 18th, 1689, the Jacobites laid siege to the city of Derry. It lasted for 105 days and left 8,000 dead. It is known that even children were involved in the fighting, and one young man would write his place in history.
James MacGregor is known as the Moses of the Scots-Irish. He was born in Magilligan in 1677. Now, we know very little about his family. We know his father was a Captain David MacGregor, probably a yeomanry captain. But during the siege of Londonderry, he, his father, his mother, his brother and sister were all in the city. He becomes notable in the city because he is said to be the boy, 12 years of age, who fires the cannon from the top of St Columb's Cathedral when he sees the ships coming up the river, the Mountjoy, and the two other ships which have broken the boom.
Over the next 9 years, the civil and religious freedoms that so many had fought for were now being denied by church and state.
For Presbyterians in this era, life had become very difficult at the beginning of the 18th century. The Test Act was passed. Now, this really was penal laws against the Presbyterians. And the Presbyterians saw this as betrayal. They had fought for the Williamite Wars, they had supported the government, and now the government was banning them. Presbyterian marriages, Presbyterian funerals were banned, children were declared illegitimate. They had to pay tithes to the Church of Ireland. Public office was closed to them. And so many Presbyterians felt aggrieved. They wanted difference. They wanted to get out of this.
Many of those in Ulster saw America as an opportunity to have a new way of life and the religious and civil opportunities that they yearned for. Their leader and pastor was James McGregor.
Now, what do they take with them? They take with them their spinning wheels. They take with them flax seed. They take seed potatoes. These things will be of benefit to them. All plans are arranged. But one of the saddest things locally is what we call the living wakes. There were no dead people, but they might as well be dead. That was the night you left. Your family would come, your friends, your neighbours, and they would gather. And there would be hymn singing, there would be music. It wouldn't be a happy occasion.
5 ships would leave from Coleraine and Londonderry. And at the mouth of the Foyle River, Colmore Fort would be the last sight they would have of Ireland. A new world and a new adventure now lay ahead.
Absolutely fascinating. We should know more about William of Orange, about 1688, about Battle of the Boyne, the foundation of our parliamentary system of government.
Absolutely, we should. But in other news, Novak Djokovic has complained, he's been complaining, about Wimbledon fans because they booed him during his match yesterday. Or did they? Or did they? Is it okay for fans to do that? We'll get the view from a legend of sport journalism very shortly indeed. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Question is...
should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artefacts are from around the world, stolen actually. I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artefacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of world heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge, because the British state's willing to do that. Is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artefacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else, because we're a very, we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world, which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always had the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 2, and you have been getting in touch.
Yes, thank you. Tim says, I must be old school. You can say anything you like about me. Words don't hurt. Sticks and stones always applies. Just grow a pair. All you easily offended woke whips. You're not allowed to say that anymore, you know? You're not allowed to say just grow a pair,
It's
are
sexist,
you? Or
isn't
man
it?
up. You're not allowed to say that.
No.
What else are you allowed to say?
Oh, do you know what?
You know when you're not allowed to do gestures on a football pitch?
If I was to do any of these gestures and say any of these words, I could just about hear compliance people running behind us and ripping us off air. We'd start playing something that wasn't us. Anyway, Catherine says normal men do not send images of their genitals.
Here, Catherine. And John says, a real woman would appreciate a nice comment. Some come to work dressed for comment. How about you said, wow, you look gross today? Yes, that would be nasty, that would.
That would certainly.
If someone said, I don't know how I'd react. I think I'd probably throw it straight back at them. I'd say, at least I don't look like you.
My goodness me. I just can't imagine saying that in any way other than, like, deeply sarcastic. Anyway, Graham says she wants us all walking about with bags on our heads just because you get the odd pervert and most of us can spot one a mile away. If I say to a lady she looks nice, it's because she does not it's because she does, not for any other reason. I've said it to my mum. Why should everyone suffer because of a few perverts?
And I agree with that as well.
Great deal of common sense in the GBNews inbox.
Have a ban on compliments in the workplace because, yes, as you say, there are a few perverts.
Crikey. Well, Keith says, so if you can't say you're looking nice today, can you say you look like something the cat's dragged in?
I think I have said that to Tom on a few Mondays.
It's OK, though, because we have hair and makeup.
When you were doing all the weekend going around on the battle buses,
oh my God,
you might have looked a bit worse for wear on
very
morning.
little. Yeah, holding chickens with Ed Davey. That did not do well for how I looked. Anyway, let's cross now to the Department of Health, where the British Medical Association will shortly be giving a statement. We're looking at the doors to the Health Department here because there have been talks this afternoon between the BMA and the new Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, all about ending these junior doctor strikes. The junior doctors, of course, asking for a 35% pay rise, although the Health Secretary says that's not something he'd be willing to cough up.
Yes, it's all going to be a little bit tricky, isn't it, for Wes Streeting? He made it clear, he promised that he was going to sit down with them on day one, get straight to it, get a resolution to this, but there ain't that much cash in the old Treasury, is there, Tom?
No, and they didn't earmark any money for this in the Labour manifesto. It would cost quite a bit for a 35% pay rise. Of course, in Scotland, they settled for 12.4%. Could we see simply mirroring that Scottish deal here? I think it's unlikely that we're going to see in a few minutes BMA junior officials walk out and say, it's over, it's done, no more strikes, hallelujah. I think this is going to go on for a bit longer.
It would be quite revealing, though, if they did sign up to a lower amount than 35%, wouldn't it?
When they refused with the Conservatives.
Yeah, it would be quite revealing. I wonder which way this is going to go. Are they going to hold Wes to account as much as they did with the previous Conservative health secretaries?
No, I remember one of the junior doctor representatives saying on the radio around the time that if the Conservatives offered the same deal as Scotland, they'd say no because they just didn't trust the Conservatives as much. Well, we're going to be back with that BMA statement as soon as we get it, but also we'll be in the House of Commons. Stick around with us for a very exciting final hour.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Rain moves north today, a dreary day in many places with some very soggy weather around. Increasingly humid in the south, meanwhile, where we did see some persistent wet weather through the day on Monday. That wet weather is now moving north into southern and central Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales. Some heavy and prolonged outbreaks of rain here. Quite a breeze as well, so all in all, a miserable day to come. A lot of cloud across the UK with some heavy showers developing through central and southern parts of the UK. And it's going to feel a bit more humid in the south with highs of 20 or 21 Celsius. Some brightness will come through from time to time, but the brightest skies will actually be across northern Scotland, where it will be largely dry, aside from the odd shower, and it will be on the cool side, 13 to 14 Celsius, but a lot more pleasant than further south into the central belt, where the rain turns heavier into the evening, with that rain continuing for much of the afternoon, evening and overnight. Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain, heavy showers through northern England as well as the east of England, some brighter skies emerging for Wales and the southwest early evening, but for many places we keep a lot of low cloud and a gloomy feel to the day. Now overnight the rain continues on its journey north into northern Scotland, but it also carries on raining across Northern Ireland and northern England, showers further south and a mild night to come with 13 to 15 Celsius for many places. But we start off Wednesday again with a lot of cloud cover, further showers or longer spells of rain for many places. Now for southern parts it will brighten up into the afternoon with conditions ending up mostly dry. Plenty of sunshine for the far south, but in the far north the rain continues and it's going to be very wet for northeast Scotland with the risk of localised flooding.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Summer could be a scorcher with your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. It's totally tax-free, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 9th of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
In the next half hour, we'll see Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak together in Parliament for the first time since the election. We'll be live for the ceremonial selection of the Speaker of the House of Commons.
And who's got the power now? The Prime Minister meets Metro mayors in Downing Street with a promise to push power away from Whitehall. But is this just a further layer of meddling, tax-raising politicians?
And NATO calls. This evening, Keir Starmer flies to Washington for his first summit as Prime Minister. He's under pressure to raise defence spending. However, that was a promise he refused to commit to during the election campaign.
And why are England fans fuming over the choice of this German referee who's to take charge of tomorrow's semi-final showdown with the Netherlands? And that Rwanda scheme. Spent so much time working on it, didn't it?
So much time,
government,
so much money.
The Rwanda government. And it turns out that we will absolutely not be getting any refund. So £270 million of our money that's gone into this cooperation agreement that was meant to lead to deportations to Rwanda. Well, not seeing any more of that cash.
Yeah, we've been hearing from Kigali this afternoon, and it does seem like they're saying the investment that has already been spent, the United Kingdom is not getting it back. Well, after all, we signed a treaty. We committed to this. Now, this government has pulled out of that treaty. They can't claw the money back, which does create a bit of a trouble for some of Keir Starmer's plans to go after the criminal gangs. He always said that that would be paid for by savings from the Rwanda scheme. Now, of course, he will be saving some of the money that won't be sent in future, but he can't claw back any of the money that has already been sent.
£270 million. It's quite a lot of money, isn't it? Just wasted.
Well, we built some nice accommodation in Rwanda. I hope they can find good uses for it that won't be for our asylum seekers.
Well, yes, the Rwanda government has said we held up our side of the bargain, but alas, that scheme is very much over. It was one of the first things Labour have done in government.
Much more to come after your headlines with Mark White.
Well, just after 2 o'clock, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. 3 asylum seekers have ended their High Court legal action after the government scrapped the Rwanda deportation scheme. Lawyers for the people who cannot be named for legal reasons were told today that the cases would no longer continue. According to the Home Office, their legal costs will now be paid for by the taxpayer. It comes after Home Secretary Yvette Cooper branded the Rwanda policy a con. Meanwhile, just a day after the first Channel migrants arrived since the Labour government took power, more small boats are crossing today. GB News can now confirm that up to 300 illegal immigrants have been picked up from the English Channel so far today. 4 Border Force vessels and a lifeboat arrived in Dover Harbour throughout the morning. A number of other boats have been spotted in the Channel and Border Force vessels are responding. Labour has vowed to end small boat crossings by going after the criminal gangs. Labour ministers will sit on the government front benches for the first time in 14 years when Parliament returns within the hour. 643 MPs will gather to elect a Speaker, with Sir Lindsay Hoyle expected to put himself forward once again. They'll also swear an oath ahead of Parliament's state opening next Wednesday. And Sir Keir Starmer will speak for the first time at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. Well, the new Cabinet met this morning for the second time in just 3 days. Ministers departed Downing Street after discussing Sir Keir Starmer's key priorities for his first 100 days in office. At the heart of that agenda, moves to radically boost economic growth, build hundreds of thousands of new homes and tackle illegal immigration. And tonight, the Prime Minister will head to Washington to join other NATO leaders. The summit will mark Sir Keir Starmer's debut on the world stage, with support for Ukraine at the top of the agenda. The Labour leader has already pledged his unshakable support for the alliance. The Prime Minister will also meet with US President Joe Biden at the White House, where they'll discuss the special relationship between the UK and the US. The summit comes as world leaders condemn Russia's missile attack on the main children's hospital in Kyiv. A spokesman for the local emergency services said the rescue efforts had now switched to a recovery operation. Ukraine's President Zelensky says 37 people, including 3 children, are now confirmed to have died. More than 170 others were injured when the missiles struck in broad daylight on Monday. Well, pay negotiations are underway between England's junior doctors and the new government. Representatives from the British Medical Association are meeting Department of Health officials to try to end the long-running dispute. 11 strikes over 20 months have caused widespread disruption to millions of appointments. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has previously said he would not agree to demands for a 35% pay rise. The technology innovation company Dyson is to cut 1,000 jobs as part of a global restructuring. The Wiltshire-based engineering firm employs 3,500 people across the UK and is best known for the invention of the bagless vacuum cleaner. Well, we can take you to the Department of Health now to hear from the British Medical Association.
No member of the public wants this to last for any longer than it needs to, but it being almost 6 months since we were last here shows that it has all stalled for too long already.
Are you confident you can resolve this without further contact?
We're confident that the meeting today was positive, and we've already agreed to meet again next week with the Secretary of State to further discuss how we can progress. Today we talked a little bit about some of the roadblocks that have prevented us from progressing so far and how we can navigate through those to reach a resolution.
And I think that's really positive, actually. The Secretary of State was very interested in learning what went wrong, and I think that bodes well because that's not a question that's ever been asked of us before, which has been a problem for being able to get round any kind of dispute. So he was listening, and I just hope that they learn.
Is it still the case, and did you discuss 35% phased in over 3 years and the whole issue of restoration? Did you ask for that, and did he say he was sympathetic?
We've spoken about pay restoration and that no doctor's worth less than they were in 2008. We spoke about very clearly that we're happy to talk about a timeline and a time frame. And now it's just down to the government to be able to come up with a credible offer through the series of negotiations that we're about to go into.
That gives doctors the confidence that there is restoration in their pay and therefore value, and to plug the ever-gaping workforce crisis that we face.
Did you seem open to the idea, though, of a multi-year pay restoration period?
That wasn't excluded from today's talks.
There was a clear conversation about time frame and about a journey. And I think that's really important because ultimately it's going to be good for everyone. A journey and stability is going to be good for a junior doctor workforce that is most vulnerable to all sorts of cost of living crises, financial problems, geographic instability, social support instability, friends, family. You know, all of these problems hit the junior doctor workforce much greater than most other workforces as we're forced to rotate around the country.
So did you feel you heard enough to take it forward, and that 35% or something near it over a few years is possible? Is that what you interpret it as?
We're always happy to take forward any talks. We've always engaged in good faith. We've always tried to develop things. As I said, you know, this Secretary of State actually wanted to learn what was going wrong and why things were stalling, and we're happy to have those conversations. We've never once walked out of the room, and we never will. We want to continue talking, and that's what we've agreed to. We've agreed to a meeting next week.
With the possibility of something approaching your original restoration demand of 30% plus, do you think?
Well, our claim has never changed, as Rob Lawrenson was saying, because no doctor's worth less than they were in 2008. How we get there is very much what we hope to be discussing and what we'll be looking to progress on when we meet again next week.
Is the starting point sort of 12.5% going over last year in line with Wales and Scotland?
Those sorts of numbers are things that we will be waiting to discuss with the team when we do so.
So I'll ask you once again, how confident are you that this can be resolved fairly soon without further action by your union?
Well, I think it's definitely this meeting was definitely a positive step, but I don't think we can place a value or a certainty on how quickly things are going to take to resolve or what might needs to happen to make things resolve. This was definitely a collaborative talk, and I think it's fair to say we have no plans at the moment to call for strike action.
We didn't come into this meeting expecting a resolution to our deal, to our dispute from today. We were hoping to be heard and to be listened to, which is what happened, and we hope to be able to build on that. And as so long as we can build on that and continue in good faith, as we have always done, but does seem to be reciprocated now, then it does suggest that we will be able to reach a resolution.
Will the government expect concessions from you? Was that mentioned at all? On working practices?
Well, look, there were talks about reform, and we're interested to hear what that might pan out to be. This is a complex negotiation, okay, and it's going to take some time. This was a positive first step, but that's all it was, a first step. There's much more meat that needs to be added to the bones before we're going to be able to come out with any sort of agreement.
Okay, anything you want to add? So you're back next week with West Streeting, are you?
Correct.
And when does the real negotiation start?
Well, once they've got their feet under the table and they've been able to get their ducks in a row and begin in earnest.
Is that next week?
Well, we're very much hoping so.
We'll be waiting to hear. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, there we have it. The co-chairs of the junior doctors portion of the British Medical Association giving their statement after those initial talks with the new health secretary.
Perhaps a little bit of a different tone.
Certainly.
Conciliatory. The first step. There's no certainty for now. It's all about the time frame. It's all about what happens next. They're meeting up with Wes next week again. Wes Streeting, I should say, the Secretary of State for Health. So yes, collaboration. Talk of that.
We got a little bit of an inkling of what went on in that discussion. Wes Streeting, the new health secretary, asking the question, what went wrong in these discussions beforehand? And of course, this commitment to seemingly work towards a 35% pay increase, although perhaps over the course of many, many years. I don't think that there would have been another meeting had the government not said, yes, we agree with your aim of getting to 35%, we don't agree with doing that in 1 year. I think that's likely what has just taken place in the Department of Health. But of course, we'll be back there next week.
Yes, and if they were hoping for a cheque to be written to them today, it has not happened. It seems as though this may drag on a little bit longer.
Well, demands for more money from the junior doctors, also demands from those senior military figures. Of course, Keir Starmer is facing pressure to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. And to discuss that further, delighted to be joined by the former chair of the Defence Committee in Parliament, former Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, the Labour Party was a little bit cagey about its commitments to military spending during the election. But now Sir Keir Starmer will be going face-to-face with other NATO countries in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. I mean, you were just reporting earlier that attack that we saw in Kyiv by Russia on a children's hospital, the audacity in which Russia is able to persecute its war shows that NATO needs to do more. We all need to do more. Our world's getting more dangerous, not less. Russia is not losing. Ukraine is not winning. And these are the bigger questions that we need to ask ourselves. I've been calling for an increase in defence spending to 2.5%. I'm pleased that the Labour government will continue the support for Ukraine, but that is not enough. Our world is getting more dangerous. Europe's security is starting to diminish. Behind Russia sits China as well. These are the bigger questions that NATO needs to ask itself. How, in today's day and age, a country on the edge of Europe can be invaded, but this military alliance, the most potent military force in the world, cannot actually stand up and check Russia's behaviour.
Are you shamed that the Conservatives left the military in such a state? I mean, we're hearing from former heads of the British Army that we wouldn't last a 1-month small war.
No, I think that's a rather provocative way of describing things. When we came into office, these threats simply weren't there. These threats are growing. They're present and they're evolving. We need to recognize we need to do more. Absolutely right. You expand your armed forces, your army, your navy, your air force, and indeed cyber capabilities, the gray zone, according to what's coming over the horizon. And what the head of the army, indeed what I've been saying, is threats are developing. Storm clouds are gathering. Now is the time to prepare. Not just us, but NATO as a whole. And because our economy and our security are symbiotically interconnected, if we want our economy to grow, if we want prosperity, we have to invest in security as well. So yes, I want to see more spent on defense, but to say that somehow this is all the Conservatives' fault, that's too simplistic, I'm afraid.
Now, of course, there's some political stability in the United Kingdom, with a massive majority that will no doubt last at least 5 years. I'm thinking of those other major countries, those other major heads of government around that table in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. Biden, likely not long left in the presidency. Martin Schulz, 20 points behind in... Olaf Scholz, I should say, 20 points behind in the polls in Germany. Justin Trudeau, 20 points behind in the polls in Canada. Macron, of course, term limited in France as president. I mean, Britain should surely be taking a lead here.
I think you make two very powerful points. Firstly, it's in our DNA to step forward, perhaps when other nations hesitate. That's what we do. We did it a couple of times last century. That's why we've got a place at the UN Security Council, because of our international leadership, because of the statecraft that we normally present. But you also show the political turmoil that we're seeing across Europe. You could add to that the fact that Donald Trump has made it very clear he might want to actually retreat away from investment in security in Europe, which would be a huge mistake. Put it all together, and you can see that our adversaries, our competitors, will seek to take advantage of that, to see that we've become risk averse. We've had it relatively easy over the last 30 years, since the end of the Cold War. Well, those days are over. I stress again that we've entered a dangerous era of insecurity, and we need to up our game.
And Tobias Ellwood, what do you suspect a large Labour majority means for our policy in the Middle East?
Another good question. I mean, again, a great example here that you've not just got Europe, you've got the Middle East, and then you've got what China is doing in the South China Sea, but also questioning our global order, exploiting the weakness, if you like, in how our rules have operated for the last numbers of decades. Put this all together, and there's absolutely, firstly, a necessity to increase defense spending, but also statecraft, to cajole and encourage other nations to work together to defend what our values are. We showed that in the Red Sea. Do you remember when those ships were denied passage because of what the Houthis were doing? What sits behind the Houthis, indeed Hamas and Hezbollah, is Iran. There's no Iran strategy, there's no Russia strategy, and indeed there's no China strategy. A lot of questions for those gathering in Washington, D.C. at the NATO summit to consider.
Well, Tobias Ellwood, former Conservative MP, former Defence Select Committee Chairman, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Right, let's head over to Germany, because the big game is tomorrow. There are two semi-finals, and tonight Spain face France to find out who will play the Three Lions should they progress tomorrow night against the Netherlands.
Well, the game tomorrow certainly isn't without controversy. The German referee set to officiate the semi-final has previously been banned for match fixing. Well, let's get the thoughts of sports broadcaster Chris Scudder, who's in Dortmund for us. Chris, this is the most remarkable story. What on earth's going on?
Yeah, he's on the FIFA list. He's a respected referee these days, but it's a case that goes way back to almost 20 years ago now, when Felix Zweier, the man who will be in charge of the game tomorrow night, was he denies any wrongdoing, but basically he was found to have received a payment of 300 euros from a referee in a match-fixing corruption investigation. He received some money, and the referee involved was subsequently banned for life. So by association, he was banned for 6 months. It was a long time ago. He says he didn't do anything wrong and wasn't involved in doing trying to fix matches. But basically, he then had, in recent times, a an altercation, shall we say, with England's Jude Bellingham, who has been one of the stars of this tournament, of course. Bellingham was playing right in this city where I am now, in Dortmund, for his former club against Bayern Munich. And there was a controversial moment where the referee, Mr. Zweier, awarded Bayern Munich a penalty, which cost Dortmund the game. Jude Bellingham, after the game, he was 18 years old at the time, said, well, anybody who's been involved in match fixing, what do you expect? And because of those comments, Bellingham was fined 40,000 euros. He was only 18 at the time. So you can see the association now, can't you? Bellingham's playing tomorrow on the very same ground where this incident happened, with this referee who has a history of match fixing, should we say, in inverted commas, because he was banned for 6 months. And, that history has followed him.
And we spoke to Jimmy Bollard a little earlier, the former football player, and he spoke a little bit about the fans. We asked him about, the booing and whether the attitude of England fans has been correct. And he said, you know what, people need to get behind the team. It's very important, isn't it, Chris?
It is, yeah. I mean, I've just come in on the train now, literally. I mean, we're in the Ruhr Valley here, all these industrial towns where all the England fans are spread out all over the place. So we just sort of moved up from Cologne about an hour on the train to Dortmund. But yeah, there'll be the capacity. It's a famous ground, the Dortmund one. They have a thing called the Yellow Wall, which Jude Bellingham played in front of for 3 years. It'll be like a home match for him. But the fans make an awful lot of difference, really. Having said that, the Dutch are one of the best supported teams here, and of course they've only got to just drive across the border, so it's much much easier for them to get here. I'm guessing that inside the stadium it'll be pretty split. I think the support for both teams, but in the town here. And the fan zones, there'll be a tremendous colour and a fantastic atmosphere, as there was the other night when England had that amazing victory in the penalty shootout.
Cracking. Well, we're looking forward to it. Chris Scudder, thank you very much for joining us live from Dortmund.
Yes, now the BMA, they've called talks with Health Secretary a good first step. Could they put an end to the doctor strikes? We'll be putting this to the former chair of the BMA himself. We'll also be heading live to the House of Commons. Lots going on there.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to brighten the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic JJ Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Jonson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
A piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eyes because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. At 25 minutes past 2, we're going to take you straight inside the new House of Commons, because MPs are gathering now for what will be a pretty remarkable sight. Many, many more Labour MPs for the first time, and they're clapping, which is unparliamentary. You're not allowed to clap. They can't hear me, of course, but there they are. You can see lots of MPs choosing to wear red. This is a very different look House of Commons. Let's just watch what is happening here, because soon all of these members are going to be called from the Commons to head to the Lords, where the ceremony of selecting a new Speaker will take place, because there is only one candidate, of course, to be the next Speaker. That's Sir Lindsay Hoyle. So aside from any grand upset, this will just be a reselection of the existing Speaker, but there's a lot of pomp and ceremony that goes alongside that.
And they will have swapped sides of the Commons.
Certainly.
The Labour Party will now be on the left.
Yeah.
I believe you'll have the Conservatives and other opposition parties on the right.
You can actually tell from all of the red that you can see on the left and the blue that you can see on the right. They're really wearing their party colours. You can see particularly female members of the House. You can see lots of red dresses on the left-hand side of the screen and lots of blue dresses on the right-hand side of the screen. And there, around the Speaker's chair, you can see this is a packed House of Commons. Of course, the House of Commons only fits 450 members, but there are 650 MPs. Why is that? Well, Winston Churchill, when reinstating the House, which was bombed to bits during the Blitz, during the Second World War, when it was reconstructed, there were all of these different arguments about whether or not we make the House of Commons bigger so it fits every MP, maybe give every MP a desk, all the rest of it. Churchill said no, because of occasions like this, grand state occasions, Prime Minister's questions, all the rest of it. It's got to feel packed in. It's got to feel busy. People have got to be sitting on top of each other, sitting on the stairs. That's Churchill's vision for what Parliament should look like.
Enthusiasm, Tom. Yes, very packed out. Can you spot where some of the surprise MPs are? Nigel Farage, for one. Where is he sitting?
I'm peeling my eyes back.
Perhaps he's standing.
Because you would expect the Reform 5 to be on the right-hand side of the chamber, closest to the camera. I'm a little too far away to see any clear faces marked out.
This will be a difficult day for Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
A fantastic day for Sir Keir Starmer. A very difficult day for Rishi Sunak to go from being Prime Minister to Leader of the Opposition, to take his seat now on the opposition benches rather than the government benches.
And of course, part of this ceremony of walking from the House of Commons towards the House of Lords, they'll walk in pairs, as they do whenever Parliament opens, and Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak will be walking side by side. Will they make small talk? What will they say to one another? It will be fascinating to see.
And is this the fullest we'll see the chamber in the next 5 years? Everyone is there. Everyone is there. Even for some of the most important debates in the Commons, it's half full.
Yes, that's certainly true. I think this is going to be one of the busiest times that we see the House of Commons. Of course, over the next few days, all of these MPs will be officially signing in as MPs, taking the oath, or indeed affirming the oath, in order to become a Member of Parliament. I say all of them apart from 7 members who are the Sinn Féin members, who by tradition do not take their seats, do not turn up, do not vote, do not speak.
And of course, we have a few independents, don't we, who've got their seats, particularly on the issue of Gaza, the issue of Palestine. They'll be taking their seats as well. 5 of them
Four of them elected primarily on Gaza, and then 5 if we include Jeremy Corbyn, who, of course, won his seat as an independent, not solely on the issue of Gaza, but, of course, that featured in his campaign as well. There's also Shokat Adam, Adnan Hussein, Yaqub Khan and Iqbal Mohammed, all elected as independents in this parliament. Again, we won't be able to quite see where they're sitting. They won't be on the government benches. They're on the left. They'll be sitting on the right-hand side of the chamber as we're looking at it now, which is awash with many different parties. Over 70 Lib Dems, 121 Conservatives, 5 Reform MPs, 4 Greens and 9 SNP MPs as well.
Well, there you go. Now, joining us in the studio is the former Conservative MP Miriam Cates and parliamentary historian Daniel Britton. Daniel, thank you very much for coming in on this momentous occasion.
Thank you.
A new parliament.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit about what we can expect.
It is a quite extraordinary ceremony. For lovers of slightly eccentric ceremony, this is way up there. State opening seems low-key compared to this. It's the formal opening of Parliament, not the state opening, but the King has sent down 5 royal commissioners to get Parliament ready for his appearance at state opening next week. And what they've got to do, the 5 commissioners, who are all members of the House of Lords, they're the leaders of the parties in the House of Lords, plus the Lord Speaker. They'll be in their parliamentary robes, and they'll send off Black Rod to the House of Commons, and they'll come trotting back. And then there is a great deal of bowing and hat doffing. Some of it solo hat doffing, some of it synchronised hat doffing. It's the world leader on hat doffing, this ceremony. But when they've done that, the Commons will then be commanded to elect a Speaker, and that's what they go off and do. It takes a long time to say it all, but that's what they're going to do. And indeed, what the Lord Commissioners will say is, we have it in command from His Majesty to let you know that as soon as the members of both houses shall be sworn, the causes of His Majesty calling this Parliament will be made known to you. In other words, the contents of the King's speech.
Goodness me. Well, Miriam Cates, of course, you were there 5 years ago when Parliament was assembled for the first time in a very different look, House of Commons, to the one that we can see on our screens now.
Yes, absolutely, and it does take me back because these first few days and weeks are utterly overwhelming for new MPs. There's so much to learn, and just listening now, I realise how much I still don't know after 4.5 years.
You didn't know about the synchronised I did
not, and actually it's very...
Now's your chance.
That's right, and actually, when you are an MP in the chamber, you can't see very much, and certainly in the King's speech and occasions like that, you might be lucky enough to be standing somewhere where you can see the King. But for plenty of MPs, you're not actually as part of it as you are when you're watching on television. But this is the wonderful thing about our Parliament. We have these traditions, we have these conventions. We might not always know how they evolve, but they're so much part of our democracy, and it is a real privilege. And I know all the new MPs will be sitting there just amazed at the environment they're in.
May I say, we're now looking at the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And may I also add commiserations that you have not kept your seat. I know a lot of our viewers and listeners will be disappointed. You've been a strong voice in Parliament.
Now, Daniel Britton, we're looking both at the Commons and the Lords. You can tell it's the Lords because of the red benches, and the Commons, of course, with the famous green benches.
Yes.
What will be happening in the Commons which should we be looking at first?
Yes. And by the way, just as now here come the 5 Lord Commissioners, and they're Lord McFall, the Lord Speaker, Baroness Smith of Basildon, the new Lord Privy Seal and leader of the Labour peers, Lord Newby, leader of the Lib Dems, Lord Laming of the crossbenchers, something unique to the Lords, and Lord True, who is the outgoing Conservative leader. And like in the Commons, the sides have swapped in the Lords as to government and opposition. And they will say that it hasn't been personally convenient for His Majesty to attend today, and in fact it hasn't been personally convenient since 1790.
Here's Black Rod.
Black Rod, Sarah Clark, she gets her orders to come up to the Lord Commissioners, and if you listen now, they will give her her marching orders.
Well, let's listen in.
Let the Commons know that the Lords Commissioners desire their immediate attendance in the House to hear the Commission read.
Well, that was Lady Smith of Basildon, the new Lord Privy Seal. member of the government, of course.
And now Blackrod is walking from the House of Lords, the short distance, across Parliament, to head towards the House of Commons, which is directly opposite. And will there be the ceremonial slamming the doors in the face of Blackrod on this occasion?
Yes, there will be. There will be. In fact, Blackrod gets to trot off to the Commons quite a few times this week. She'll be doing it again this afternoon when the choice of the Commons for Speaker is approved by the King. Hasn't been turned down for quite a few centuries. But it's often a vote as who it will be. And the door will indeed be slammed because it is the King's messenger and they must give their permission.
And of course, the last time the King tried to enter, or indeed did enter the House of Commons, there were several arrests, Miriam, and therefore, ceremonially, the Commons' supremacy is shown with this slamming of the door.
Yes, and that's what it's all about. Obviously, we have this amazing setup with the Commons and the Lords, and still, at the moment, hereditary peers. But all this is about showing that the will of the people, the democratic will that was expressed last Thursday, is supreme, that it is the Commons who will get the final say in legislation, and that's what this is all about, in a very grand way.
And Miriam, how will some of your former colleagues in the House of Commons, the Conservatives, much depleted? A difficult day.
Yeah, very much. And obviously seeing my former colleagues sitting on the other side of the House is quite stark to watch. And as you say, quite depleted. I think this time, 4.5 years ago, we didn't quite fit all on the government benches. And now obviously Labour have even more.
Blackrod is going to send her command from the Lords. It's quite long.
Members of the House of Commons, the Lords who are duly authorised by virtue of His Majesty's Commission to declare the opening of Parliament, desire the presence of this Honourable House in the House of Peers to hear the Commission read.
And the Commons will be led not by the Speaker, because they haven't got a Speaker now, but by Edward Lee, who is the new Father of the House. And if Jeremy Corbyn had signed the roll a little earlier than Edward Lee, he would be the Father of the House, and Diane Abbott would be the Mother of the House. Diane Abbott is the Mother of the House, but Edward Lee...
And there she is second.
Why do we have a Father of the House and a Mother of the House?
That's a good question. I mean, it's not an official job, but there is a sort of recognition of the most senior member of the House of Commons.
And it's not the oldest member of the House of Commons, it's the member who has served the longest.
Yes, yes, that's right. So, and Edward Lee goes back to the 1983 general election.
Wow. Wow.
Because Peter Bottomley lost his seat, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. He was the Father of the House. And that's what's such a wonderful thing about the House of Commons. It is a very equitable place in many ways. It is one member, one vote. But there also is this unspoken seniority which allows members who've been there a longer time, who understand more of the heritage and traditions, to take a leading role in debates and obviously in today. And it does work very well.
Did you feel that when you entered?
Absolutely, and there are, on the face of it, you know, you're all equal, but you certainly get called in debates earlier if you're more senior, if you have had a government role. And again, I think that's good, that respect for greater experience, whilst at the same time everybody being on paper equal. It's a very good thing.
Yes, when they arrive in the Lords, which can't be too long, that's when we'll get the mega bowing and hat doffing from the Lord Commissioners.
Most exciting.
Them. So, no Speaker at this stage. It will be the Clerk of the House of Commons.
And the hat doffing is a mark of respect.
It is, and actually, funnily enough, they're meant to be identifying themselves, technically. Here we go.
Oh, yes. Synchronised.
Not very synchronised, I think. I think they got better.
Lords and members of the House of Commons, we are commanded by His Majesty to let you know that it has not been convenient for him to be present here on this day in his royal person. He hath thought fit by letters patent under the Great Seal to empower several lords therein named to do all things in His Majesty's name which are to be done on His Majesty's part in this Parliament, as by the letters patent will more fully appear.
Now, the reading clerk, Chris Johnson, will now go through each member. It's a fairly slow process, but they will all be announced, and when they're announced, they will doff their hat.
The United Kingdom of
Ladies just tilt their head.
And of our other realms and territories king, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. To all to whom these presents shall come, greeting. Whereas, by the advice of our Council, for certain arduous and urgent affairs concerning us, the state and defence of our United Kingdom and the Church, we have ordered a certain Parliament to be holden at our City of Westminster on Tuesday the 9th day of July instant. And forasmuch as for divers causes and considerations we cannot conveniently be present in our royal person in our said Parliament upon the said Tuesday the 9th day of July, know ye that we, trusting in the fidelity, discretion and care of the most reverend Father in God and our faithful counsellor Justin Portal, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and Metropolitan, our well-beloved and faithful counsellor Shabana Mahmood, Chancellor of Great Britain, and others our councillors hereinafter mentioned, by the advice of our said council, do give and grant, by the tenor of these presents, unto the said Justin Portal, Archbishop of Canterbury, Shabana Mahmood, Chancellor of Great Britain, John Francis, Lord Macfall of Alcluith, Lord Speaker.
So now they're going to be going through all of the names of those on the steps.
That's right. The 5 of them all squashed together on a rather tight sort of bench, get in turn. Lady Smith there. The first 2 aren't actually taking part. The Archbishop of Canterbury is always named in these commissions, and so is the Lord Chancellor. Robert Buckland did take part in 2019. He said, even though he's a member of the House of Commons, he was allowed into the Lords to fulfil this role.
Now, the Lord Chancellor used to be wearing a wig, used to do all the walking backwards sorts of things. They've sort of dulled down the role of the Lord Chancellor in recent years.
The Lord Chancellor at one time was only really in charge of the courts and the court system. In 2005, Tony Blair reformed the office. They thought they could abolish it. Then it turned out there were so many statutes that named the Lord Chancellor, they'd spend a whole parliamentary session just repealing those statutes.
So they combined it with the Justice Secretary?
Yes, they combined it with the Justice Secretary from now on. And they do fit together quite well, but the Lord Chancellor has to take an oath upholding the rule of law.
And yet it's quite funny to have combined the Lord Chancellor with the Justice Secretary, because technically the Lord Chancellor is the most senior individual in government, ahead of the Prime Minister.
Allegedly, yes. I don't think in practice, but in a sort of the formal pecking order of the
Gets to walk first and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Miriam, there may well be some members of Parliament who don't approve of all this pomp, tradition, elitism and all of that, but I imagine secretly they quite enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely, and I think everybody grows up in this country seeing the House of Commons and the House of Lords as the seat of power, the seat of democracy, and knowing that people across the world are looking on, perhaps in amusement, but also with respect. We are seen as the mother of democracy. A lot of the ways of governing that we have here have been copied around the world, even if they haven't quite copied the wigs and the gold. But I quite like that bit. But I think this is the difference between Conservatives and people who would consider themselves progressive. I think that you can look back through history and look at how people have developed and evolved these traditions over time and assume that mostly they're good, and we might want to change a few things here and there, whereas progressives would like to just throw it all out and start again, but that assumes we as modern people are somehow better, more wise, more knowledgeable than anyone that's come before, and I just think that's unlikely.
Lady Smith is now telling them they've got to go and elect a speaker.
Shall we listen in?
Shall so choose, here for His Majesty's royal appropriation.
I'm sure Miriam's right. A lot of MPs on both sides of the House, all sides nowadays of the House, will say, goodness, what on earth was all that about? Have I joined a very strange school? And a lot of people really dislike this at the beginning. They think, oh, is this it? Is it day one for an MP? But I've noticed over the years that MPs of all parties, say, oh, we quite like our traditions. And they then become very keen on them.
I wonder how the young Sam Carling might take this on, the 22-year-old.
So the Commons have got their marching orders, and so together with the Clerk of the Commons, Tom Goldsmith, the Sergeant-at-Arms, and Edward Lee, who will chair the election of the Speaker. They go back to the Commons, and for the next sort of 40 minutes or so, they will elect a Speaker. I doubt there's going to be another candidate apart from Lindsay Hoyle.
And then there's something quite special that happens with the election of the Speaker, Miriam. Of course, you remember the last time it happened. They're not supposed to want to be the Speaker, so there's a tradition.
That's right, and they're dragged from their seat, I think, I'm sure Daniel will correct me, but I think by a member of their own party and a member of the opposition. They're dragged to the chair because, yes, it's supposed to be an act of service. Of course, most MPs get into Parliament because they want to make their voice heard, and the one thing you can't do as Speaker is make your voice heard in a political sense. Obviously, you adjudicate the debate, you can tell each side off, you adjudicate the proceedings, but you can't have a political view. And, of course, most MPs get into Parliament because they do have political views. So, in theory, although it is a very prestigious position and you get a very nice house on the parliamentary estate, in theory, the MP is not supposed to want to do it.
And Daniel, in history...
Sorry, one question. Why has no one else put themselves forward?
Well, it does happen. For instance, when Betty Boothroyd became Speaker in 1992, Speaker Wetherell had resigned the job, gave up being an MP at that election, and so there was a choice for the House of Commons, when they reassembled, to elect a new Speaker. It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare because what tends to happen is a retiring Speaker tends to go before the general election. And so when John Bercow went in 2019, the election of the new Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, was actually just shortly before the election.
Now, shall we listen in?
1A, I am now required to ascertain whether Sir Lindsay Hoyle is willing to be chosen as Speaker, and I call Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
Firstly, I'd like to thank my constituents of Chorley for returning me to this House and allowing me to put myself forward again as Speaker. It is an honour to serve the people of Chorley, as I have done steadfastly for the last 44 years as a councillor and on that local authority, then a Member of Parliament for the last 27 years. I would also like to thank my wife Catherine and daughter Emma and the staff in Chorley in that constituency office for all their support. Of course, for me, it was the first time in my political career campaigning without hearing the wise words of my late father Doug, giving me his opinions on how to campaign. He was always going to give me that. Whatever the polls were doing, whatever needed to be said, I can still hear him now saying, "Don't stop now, you have to keep going." Well, I've got to say, Doug, after 25,000 steps a day during the campaign, I certainly did do that. I want to say a warm welcome to all the new members of the House. May I also welcome Sir Edward Lee to his new role as Father of the House. And to Diane Abbott in her place as Mother of the House. Sir Edward, you have served this place and your constituents for 41 years. Diane, you have served for 37 years and broken many glass ceilings along the way. Thank you to the former Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley, and of course to the Mother of the House, Baroness Harriet Harman. And can I thank them for the support that they gave me during the speakership. Sir Edward, I know you're a man that respects traditions. Indeed, when you ran for Speaker in 2019, you were keen to bring back the use of the wig for the Speaker. Hopefully, though, you'll look kindly on me and agree I still have a decent enough head of hair. Although not quite as luscious as the former member for Lichfield. You know, I'm only joking, Michael. I was thinking just the other day, you must be the only person that went to bed last Thursday evening as a father of 6 children and woke up the father of 649. On a serious note, it's been an absolute privilege to serve this House as the 158th Speaker. I've got to say that 4.5 years have flown. With the authority of the Chair comes great responsibility. which is something I've never taken lightly or for granted. I know from experience that decisions have consequences, but with experience comes wisdom, and if re-elected, I will be guided by that as I continue to be fair, impartial and independent. To say I have had the most unusual speakership in the last Parliament is an understatement. From ensuring that the House could function during the COVID pandemic, and to new members, they might want to Google the Rees-Mogg conga, to adapting technology developed during COVID to allow President Zelensky to be the first world leader to broadcast to MPs in this chamber. It was, of course, an honour to represent this House at the lying in state of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, to present the address to the new King in Westminster Hall, to attend his coronation. Needless to say, in this role, you need staying power. I've already been Speaker during the tenure of 3 Prime Ministers, 2 monarchs, and 1 Jim Shannon. There has never been a dull moment, but it is an incredible job which I want to continue. There is so much more still to do. Because I care about the reputation and the standards of this House. I care about enabling the government to do its job in this chamber and for the opposition to hold the government to account. I care about supporting backbenchers to pursue issues which are important to their constituencies. And as a backbench member for many years, I know how important that is. And I care about you individually, both as members who have a job to do in this building, as people trying to do those jobs with constituents, staff and families to consider. I've worked tirelessly and will continue to do so to keep members safe, which is the fundamental part of protecting democracy. On that basis, I submit myself to the House as your Speaker, seeking to be your champion.
I call the honourable member for Lancaster and Wire to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Edward. I beg to move that Sir Lindsay Hoyle do take the chair of the House of Commons. The best thing, as far as I'm concerned, about having Lindsay as Speaker is how good it is to have someone in the chair who doesn't have an accent. And I've been talking to lots of my constituents over the past 6 weeks, and they agree with me too. So I figured it out, Lindsay, is that we're not the ones with the accents, it's everyone else. But seriously, Lindsay is a great champion for Lancashire, just as he is for this House of Commons. And none of us in Lancashire could have imagined that Nancy Pelosi would walk those famous cobbles of Coronation Street. But Lindsay, you did it. Because it seems there's no part of Lancashire's cultural reputation that is out of bounds for Lindsay when hosting international speakers. Indeed, having a pint of mild in the Rove's return with Nancy Pelosi. And it's a great pleasure today to be able to speak about my good friend from Chorley. But Lindsay, I have several friends from Chorley, including my office manager, Stephen, who often regales my Lancaster constituency office with tales of his childhood from Lancashire's second town. And one of my favourite anecdotes is of Chorley Zoo, and I didn't know Chorley had a zoo. Apparently it's known as Chog Zoo, which might be a first reference of Chog in Hansard, which is the slang for Chorley. But upon further investigation, this zoo was in fact Pet's Corner in Astley Park. However, to this day, I suspect a young Stephen was actually mistaking the Hoyle household menagerie as an actual zoo. Because with cats, dogs, parrots and tortoises, Lindsay Hoyle really does live out that truism that we are a nation of animal lovers. But if you head 3 hours south from Lancashire, you'll find yourself here. And arriving in this grand building as a newly elected member is daunting. The weight of pressure that you feel to deliver for your constituents, to use parliamentary procedures that seem so confusing, to bring about the change that you've promised can be immense. and it can be difficult to know where to start. But a good place to start is by electing a good Speaker of the House of Commons, one with experience of eventualities that could not be foreseen. Lindsay recalled in his remarks the COVID restrictions we needed to adapt to at speed during the pandemic. Indeed, he is the Speaker who steered us through that pandemic and steered us through those re-smog congas. He adapted procedures for the times we found ourselves in. But it's also important to know that you have a Speaker who champions the voices of us backbenchers, one who ensures that all voices, government and opposition, are heard. Our Speaker is fair, impartial and independent. Newly elected members will find a great friend in our Speaker, and I know I have. Being from Lancashire myself, I have had the good fortune of knowing Lindsay before I was elected here, and over the years he has been a great source of advice and guidance, some of which I took and some of which I chose to ignore. But all I can say is that the advice that I ignored, I regret ignoring and live to tell the consequences. So, despite being annoyingly right about many things, which is a good Lancashire trait, by the way, he will ensure that his door is open to all members at times of need. And I can vouch that he does a good brew. It's Yorkshire tea, though. But if you prefer something from the right side of the Pennines, from the Red Rose County, it's the only place on this estate I've managed to get a hot Vimto outside of my own office. However, Lindsay, we all have our character flaws, and regrettably, Lindsay does not support Lancashire's finest football team, Barrow. Instead, donning the colours of Bolton Wanderers. But note, we have a Bolton Wanderers fan. But note, that is a team which has both blue and red on its crest, and I think that exemplifies Mr. Speaker's even-handedness. And as a proud champion of Lancashire's rugby league tradition, when outside of Westminster, his favourite place is cheering on Warrington Wolves, or in the summer months, Lancashire County Cricket. And like all good sports people, Lindsay knows fair play and hard work. And for all those reasons, and so many more, I am proud and honoured to propose that Sir Lindsay Hoyle takes the chair today.
The question is that Sir Lindsay Hoyle do take the chair of this House as Speaker. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of that opinion say no, to the contrary. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.
Get in.
Before I take the chair of Speaker-elect, I wish to thank the House for the honour that is again bestowed upon me. I am aware that it is the greatest honour it can give any of its members. I propose to do all within my power to preserve and cherish its best traditions. Right, could I just also say thank you to both of you, Kat and Debbie. Thank you. Before I call the Prime Minister, could I just say that we have a busy day ahead of us with further ceremony in the House of Lords and the most returning honourable members to be sworn in. I therefore encourage speeches from Prime Ministers, the opposition and other leaders that I would discourage, that I would hope they can be quite brief today. And I do hope that members will respect that it is only leaders, and I'm sorry for other members that may wish to speak. But I've got to say a big thank you to the staff of this House for the way that they've ensured all new members, the way that they've been brought in and shown the way around. I hope the bodies and everybody involved has made a real difference. I've got to say, it is light years from 97 when I first came in, and may we continue with that. I now call the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker-elect, on behalf of the whole House, may I be the first to congratulate you on your re-election. Those of us here in the previous Parliament will always remember the wonderful support that you provided to the former Conservative member, Craig McKinley, and his inspiring battle to overcome his injuries from sepsis. All of those returning will remember, as I do, the speech he gave just a few weeks ago, which was inspiring and moving, and we wish him well, and I had the privilege on that occasion to meet his family and his young daughter. That support, Mr. Speaker-elect, was characteristic of your profound care for the interests and welfare of all members, especially backbenchers. And I'm grateful that new members will be able to look to you as they begin the great privilege of serving their constituents in this House. And may I too welcome each and every one of the new members who is here for the first time starting their great responsibility. May I also thank Sir Edward for presiding over this election and congratulate him on becoming the new father of the House. More than 40 years of continuous service. That is a stunning achievement. And now, back in the 1970s, Sir Edward wrote a book described as, and I quote, a personal collection of quotations dating from 3000 BC to the present day, which might be said to cast some light on the workings of the Tory mind. Mr. Speaker-elect, after the last 6 weeks, I think it might be time for a new edition. Mr. Speaker-elect, you preside over a new Parliament, the most diverse Parliament by race and gender this country has ever seen. And I'm proud of the part that my party has played in that, proud of the part that every party has played in that, including in this intake, the largest cohort of LGBT plus MPs of any Parliament in the world. And given all that diversity, Mr. Speaker-elect, I hope you will not begrudge me for a slight departure from convention to also pay tribute to the new mother of the House, Diane Abbott, who has done so much in her career over so many years to fight for a Parliament that truly represents modern Britain. We welcome her back to her place. And now, as in any new Parliament, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to put an end to a politics that has too often seemed self-serving and self-obsessed, and to replace that politics of performance with the politics of service. Because service is a precondition for hope and trust, and the need to restore trust should weigh heavily on every member here, new and returning alike. We all have a duty to show that politics can be a force for good. So whatever our political differences, it's now time to turn the page, unite in a common endeavour of national renewal, and make this new Parliament a Parliament of service. Thank you.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Well, Mr. Speaker-elect, I'm pleased to join the Prime Minister in welcoming you back to the Speaker's chair. And can I also praise the wonderful speech from the Honourable Member for Lancaster and Wyre? And can I start by congratulating the Prime Minister on his election victory? And as he takes on his formidable task, he and his family deserve the good wishes of all of us in this House. Now, in our politics, we can argue vigorously, as the Prime Minister and I did over the past 6 weeks, but still respect each other. And whatever disputes we may have in this Parliament, I know that everyone in this House will not lose sight of the fact that we are all motivated by our desire to serve our constituents, our country, and advance the principles that we honourably believe in. And to every member, new and old, let me welcome them to their places and congratulate them on their results. To be sent to this place by one's constituents is the greatest honour, privilege, and responsibility. I know every one of us will be trying to repay the trust placed in us, and I look forward to continuing to represent the interests of my own rural North Yorkshire constituents. One of the great aspects of our system is no matter how high you rise, you still have that constituency which keeps you grounded. And my advice to all members is to appreciate the role that you have every day that you have it. And for those of us in my party, let me begin with a message to those who are no longer sitting behind me. I am sorry. We have lost too many diligent, community-spirited representatives whose wisdom and expertise will be missed in the debates and discussions ahead. It is important that after 14 years in government, the Conservative Party rebuilds. So now we will take up the crucial role of His Majesty's official opposition, professionally, effectively, and humbly. And restoring trust begins by remembering that being here is an opportunity to do what those we serve expect of us. And in our case, that means holding the new government to account. Can I congratulate the Father of the House, the member for Gainsborough? My right honourable friend has given 41 years of remarkable, dedicated service to this House and his constituency. I know full well how ferociously my right honourable friend fights for the interests of his constituents, and I applaud him for that. My right honourable friend is also testament to the benefits of an early morning dip in the Serpentine. And members may be interested to note that the Bottomleys have also had a big influence on my right honourable friend's career. It was in 1974 that my right honourable friend ran against Arthur Bottomley in Middlesbrough in his first effort to enter this place. And today, he takes over from Sir Peter, who will be missed. And can I also congratulate the new mother of the House, the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. We have our differences on policy, but no one can deny the Right Honourable Lady's important role in this House and the inspiration for so many young women of colour that she has provided. The Right Honourable Lady is true in every sense of the word, a trailblazer. And can I join with you, Mr. Speaker-elect, to thank House staff for their hard work in welcoming our new colleagues to this House and their service over the coming Parliament. And finally, may I congratulate you, Mr. Speaker-elect. When you first ascended to the Speaker's chair, you did so with a healthy majority, and that was testament to your wide appeal and the confidence in which this House places in you and your judgments. The last Conservative Prime Minister, the Right Honourable John Major, who spoke from these opposition benches, said about the role of the Speaker, "The job specification is pretty daunting. The patience of Job and the wisdom of Solomon are only the basic requirements. We demand also impartiality, independence and fairness." Well, Mr. Speaker-elect, you have shown over the past 4.5 years how to protect that careful balance. The last few years in this House have been at times difficult, and you, sir, have always brought this House together. That was clear when we lost our colleague, Sir David Amess. And I know your guidance and support for members then was greatly appreciated. It is a privilege to be in this House. Our democracy is powerful, and as we have witnessed, it can be definitive. But I know that this House will, true to its best traditions, hold the executive to account. And I know that Mr. Speaker-elect will facilitate that. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker-elect, I have no doubt that we will face difficult days together in this place, but I also know that I speak for the whole House when I say that we will all welcome your leadership and guidance in the months and years ahead.
I call the Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Mr. Speaker-elect, as the first backbencher to speak in this Parliament, I seem to remember that almost the very first thing you said, almost before you even arrived in the chair to start your distinguished career as our Speaker, you said that your primary job was to defend us backbenchers. And I know that you will do that with enormous spirit and diligence. I know that this place is primarily about great events and the government being held to account by the opposition, but it's also about the right and the duty for all of us backbenchers, even if some of our views are a bit idiosyncratic, to have our views and to have our say. We all welcome the fact that we are such a diverse Parliament in every single way, but above all, we are a Parliament of a diversity of views. We are all equal, although, to be fair, some are more equal than others. But you will defend our right to speak our mind, to hold the government to account. I'd like to pay tribute to my predecessor, Sir Peter Bottomley, who gave such wonderful service to this House. And he sent me a lovely little note today. He said, have fun, do some good, and make people happy. And you, Mr. Speaker, I think you stand up every single day, and you can't make all of us happy all the time, but you try and make most of us happy for most of the time. Thank you very much.
The Mayor of the House, Diane Abbott.
I would like to congratulate the Speaker-elect on his election and say this. He has been a Speaker through tumultuous times, but he has never failed to serve with grace and expertise and fairness. I would also like to congratulate the 304 new members of Parliament who have entered Parliament after this election and say to them, it is a great job and you will never regret coming here. I would also like to congratulate the officers of the House who have organised such a meticulous and careful induction. I remember when I was a new MP, they just gave you a bunch of keys and told you to get on with it. So I have to congratulate the officers. I would also like to say that when I was a new member in 1987, there were only 40 female members of Parliament. Today we have 264. And some of us are glad that we have lived to see this. And I can't speak about the increased numbers of female members of Parliament without referencing my predecessor, Baroness Harriet Harman, who did so much to work to have an equal and diverse House. We are going into very tumultuous times. And historically, this House has played a role in these events, both nationally and internationally. And I'm sure it will be the same going forward, and we will be presided over in the excellent way of the Speaker-elect.
I call the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker-elect, it is a real pleasure and privilege to say on behalf of these benchers, congratulations on your re-election. You know only too well how tough a task you're taking on, so thank you for agreeing to serve. You've shown time and again your commitment to the vital role this House plays in holding the government of the day to account. The new government of the day, as the Mother of the House has just said, faces a very difficult task, clearing up the mess it has inherited. We on these benches will hold the government to account. That is our job. We will focus on the health and care crisis. We will focus on ending the sewage scandal. We will focus on helping people with the cost of living crisis. Mr. Speaker-elect, the new government has a huge majority, and therefore it is a particularly difficult job for the Speaker to help the opposition parties as it does its job in holding the government to account. I'm sure you'll do it with independence and impartiality, as you always have done. And we on these benches want to work constructively with you as you do that, as the largest third-party force in this Parliament for over 100 years. And for new members, can I say, Mr. Speaker-elect has always been a real champion for the security and safety of all members and all our staff, as well as looking after our health and welfare, and we are grateful to you for doing that, sir. Just yesterday, you asked after my health following my active campaign. And the House may be interested to know that after I had reassured you about my health, you expressed real enthusiasm about bungee jumping. So can I congratulate you again and wish you the very best for this Parliament.
National Party, Stephen Flynn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to begin by welcoming all new members to the Chamber, in particular those members from Scottish constituencies. There's probably a few more new members from Scottish constituencies than I would like to have seen, but I do look forward to working constructively with you to deliver in the best interest of the people that we are all so fortunate to represent. To you, Mr. Speaker-elect, I think it's safe to say that me and you didn't always see eye to eye during the course of the last Parliament. But in politics and in life, I think it's important to let bygones be bygones and to focus on the future. And I think events of that time showed us that me and you have quite a lot in common when it comes to both then and indeed the general election, because despite the best efforts and indeed the best intentions of certain people, we both managed to hang on to the seats that we hold so dear. Mr. Speaker, I do look forward to working constructively with you over the course of the coming weeks, months and years to allow us to best represent the people that we respect in the finest traditions of this House. Thank you very much.
I now call the Leader of the DUP, Gavin Robinson.
Congratulations, Mr. Speaker-elect. We are thrilled to see you back in your seat, but for those new members of Parliament who have yet to understand just how this place works, some of them will learn through time that Jim Shannon needed no further encouragement. And so whilst the reference was appreciated no doubt by his mother and others, others will learn to see the consequences of it. Mr. Speaker, we have all survived, and some of us indeed enjoyed a energetic election campaign. All of us will have experienced the odd one who approached you and said, "I'm not voting for you." I had my fair share. No surprise in that. But in the Guildhall Square in Londonderry, somewhere I wouldn't expect to get too many votes, this man came up and he said, "I'm not voting for you. I'm voting for Lindsay Hoyle." He was a Chorley man, and he impressed upon me the constituency grounding you have, the commitment you have to your community, the length of service you have given him and his neighbours, you and your neighbours, and he impressed upon me how fondly you are thought of within your home constituency. And I in turn was able to reflect to him how you have risen within the office you hold, how over the last number of years we have seen just how important it is to have a true champion for us as backbench representatives in Parliament. You have given us that. And it was a pleasure for me to reflect to him and have the ability to reflect to you and the House today just how fond we are of you, the solemnity that you bring to the office you hold, but that you never lose either the steadfast or the chirpy nature of your Lancashire roots. So thank you for putting yourself forward and being prepared to serve us, this House and democracy in this way. I, on behalf of my party colleagues, and I trust those others representing Northern Ireland as well, wish you well and thank you for it.
I now call the Leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker-elect, thank you very much indeed. We are the new kids on the block. We have no experience in this Parliament whatsoever, even though some of us have tried many times over the years previously to get here. So we can't judge you from working in this place, but we can judge you from the way the outside world sees you. And I don't just mean the United Kingdom, I mean the world, because Prime Minister's Questions time is global box office politics, and it's pretty clear to everybody that you act with great neutrality, that you have brought tremendous dignity to the role as Speaker, so we absolutely endorse you entirely for this job. And it is, I must say, in marked contrast to the little man that was there before you and besmirched the office so dreadfully in doing his best to overturn the biggest democratic result in the history of the country. We support you, sir, fully.
I now call the leader of Plaid Cymru, Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Lefarydd, and I too rise to congratulate you on your re-election as Speaker of this House and to wish you well, of course, in presiding over this historic session of the new Parliament. And I'm heartened that for the first time in history, the proportion of women elected here is over 40%, and more than half of those are new to this House. It is fantastic to see steady progress towards proper representation. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate not just the incoming government for their victory, but also the smaller parties in this place. All of us here, whether we belong to the largest parties, the smallest parties, or no parties at all, we were all elected in the same way. Whatever the size of our parliamentary grouping, the principle of one vote, one value is the foundation of our democracy, and that principle should be cherished and defended for the sake of all our constituents. And I repeat now to the House, Mr. Speaker, what I said upon your election all those years ago. All those constituents are equal and they all deserve respect. We begin the work of representing and championing our constituents, and I have every confidence, Mr. Speaker, that you will continue to ensure that representatives here are treated fairly, because our constituents should be treated fairly too. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
The co-leader of the Green Party, Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker-elect, and congratulations on the support you have received from across this House today. And I can already say on behalf of the new cohort of Green MPs that we have been very pleased with the support you have given us, where you've shown that you go out of your way to support new members in this House and support MPs from all parties to be able to hold the government to account and represent our constituents. And I know I speak on behalf of all the Green MPs, and I'm sure all the new MPs, in saying we are very conscious that we are here first and foremost to be constituency MPs, to represent our residents, and we appreciate your support in enabling us to do that. May I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister about the importance of politics being about public service. And I very much hope in this new Parliament we can all move to a less tribal form of politics, where we work together, where we can agree and move things forward in the national interest. Mr. Speaker-elect, thank you for your support and congratulations.
I now call the leader of the SDLP, Colm Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very glad to be back. I'm very glad to see the results of that election. Many people in Northern Ireland are delighted with it, and we look forward to holding the new government to account for the promises that they've made to the people of the north of Ireland. I want to take this opportunity also to welcome all the new members, even the ones that I profoundly disagree with. The one piece of advice I would give every new member here is to remember that the Speaker doesn't just chair the meetings. He's the boss. He is in charge of everything around this place, and it would do well for you not to fall out with him. In fact, even a bit of sucking up sometimes is good. I want to take this opportunity, as I say that, Mr. Speaker, to thank you and to congratulate you for all the fantastic work that you did over the last Parliament. You were a champion, as you said yourself, for the backbenchers of this place. A champion for the smaller parties, even when some of us pushed very, very close to the line when we felt that certain things had to be put on the record of this House. You were there, he knows what I'm talking about, you were there to protect us from some of the legal authorities who would like to get at us some of these times. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for that. I wish you all the best in corralling this new House. It is very diverse in terms of representation and in terms of opinion, and I look forward to the end of tribal politics. I think that'll be a sight to the Congratulations.
I call Sir Lucy Eastwood on behalf of the Alliance Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly congratulate you on your re-election as Speaker-elect. I am here as the new MP for Lagan Valley and representative for the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland. My presence here demonstrates a changing, more shared and integrated Northern Ireland, and of that in Alliance we are very proud. You have managed business smoothly and fairly, including ensuring that smaller parties have had their voices heard. Given the greater diversity of parties in this House, this leadership and precedent becomes even more important. I also want to put on record how well you represented Parliament on the world stage and at the time of the passing of our late Queen and the coronation of our new King. I also want to associate myself with the remarks from the Prime Minister about this job being of public service. All of us in this House do owe a debt of gratitude to our constituents. I will never forget the constituents of Lagan Valley, and I join with everybody in the whole House in looking forward to committing to public service for all. Thank you, Speaker-elect.
Finally, I call Jim Allister on behalf of the traditional unionist voice.
Mr. Speaker-elect, I join in the congratulations and best wishes to you. To this point, of course, I have observed your speakership from a distance. Now I will have the benefit of observing it rather more close up. And with me on my best behaviour and you at your tolerant best, I trust that we will have a mutually cordial relationship going forward. And I will certainly draw upon your guidance and the experience that you bring to this House. As I come to this House, I come on behalf of constituents in Northern Ireland with a very clear message that Northern Ireland's place within this United Kingdom must be restored. We must end the partitioning of our kingdom by a foreign border. And we must end a situation where 300 areas of law in Northern Ireland are not controlled by this House, not controlled by Stormont, but controlled by a foreign parliament. That is an appalling constitutional affront. And my focus in this House will be in playing my part in seeking to redress that gross inequity.
Can I just say thank you for all the kind words from the parties? I just would be remiss of me not to say thank you to the previous deputy speakers. I'm going to thank Nigel, Rosie, Eleanor and Sir Roger for stepping in as he was doing. So it is a big thank you to all of them.
I have to signify to the House the pleasure of His Majesty that the House should present their Speaker this day at 3:45 p.m. in the House of Peers for His Majesty's royal approbation.
And there we have it, the mother of all parliaments, the mother of all send-ins. Thank you very much to the previous hosts. Good afternoon, Britain, Tom Howard and Emily Carver. You join me now, Martin Daubney, 3 till 6. For full reaction to today's events, I'm joined in the studio by the political editor of the HuffPost, Kevin Schofield. Kevin, 13 speakers there, the mother and the father of the House, and 11 party leaders. The first ever speech to the Commons as Prime Minister by Sir Keir Starmer. He talked about let's unite now in a common endeavour. Next up, Rishi Sunak. Might take him some getting used to being called the leader of the opposition. It kind of must sting the first time you hear it. But he did say once again, and we both sort of looked at each other at the time, he said, I am sorry.
Yeah, I thought he struck the right tone. I think he does owe an apology to a lot of Conservative candidates who lost their seats for many reasons. So I think it was a nice touch of him to do it. And yeah, you're right, it can't be easy, you know, having gone from being Prime Minister this time last week to leading a relatively small rump of Conservative MPs on the other side of the chamber. It's a very symbolic thing as well. I was in the chamber just before it all kicked off, and to really see it, Labour on the other side, and so many of them, there isn't enough room for all the Labour MPs, and you've got this small number of Conservative MPs now on the other side of the chamber. So yeah, a difficult moment for him, and you can understand why. I think he's quite keen to shuffle off the stage as quickly as he possibly can.
And so many opposition so many Labour MPs now, Kevin, it won't be opposite benches. They'll actually sort of horseshoe around, and a lot of them be on the other side too.
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, the thing to remember is it's actually a very small chamber. There isn't enough room for all of 650 of them at the best of times. But it's supposed to be, you know, all the Labour on one side. But it's going to be physically impossible. They were crowding the gangways, there was some up in the public gallery. There just isn't enough seats for them.
And it was standing room only in there. And I thought it was quite pertinent that Rishi Sunak thanked